octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
You're watching GB News. Welcome to the live desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. Coming up in the next 10 minutes, Prime Minister's questions live from the House of Commons.
Well, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer in the chamber after a week of domestic and international turmoil. Interest rates hitting the highest level in 15 years. Government departments warned to prepare for the imminent collapse of Russia after Wagner's march on Moscow.
This morning, consumer watchdogs were hauled into number 11 following yesterday's meeting with supermarket bosses as families try to cope with the soaring cost of living.
And then more alleged Tory sleaze hitting Rishi Sunak's in-tray. TV producer Daisy Goodwin now making an official complaint against London mayoral hopeful Daniel Korski, although he denies all allegations.
Joining us in the studio today is Shadow Employment Rights Minister Justin Madders. And very soon, hopefully in like the next 2 minutes, we'll be joined by Conservative MP for Bracknell, James Sunderland.
Otherwise, you've got a long lunchtime ahead of you. But, political balance as ever.
It wouldn't be the first time the Tories have gone missing recently.
He's already getting the punches in.
However, I mean, we've got, you know, it's not a sense of crisis as such, but certainly there are now serious questions about public utilities, about supermarkets, about all sorts of prices and the pressure on consumers and the cost of living.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, to some extent, we know that there have been global factors in play, but Rishi Sunak made it one of his 5 pledges to halve inflation by the end of the year. And as we're seeing, it's just not going that way. I think the evidence the supermarkets gave to the Select Committee yesterday was very interesting, and we'll look to see what they come out with in their report. But we already know there's a Competition and Market Authority investigation into the petrol pricing that's going on in supermarkets. It'll be interesting to see what that comes up with.
And all the watchdogs called in then this morning to number 11.
Yeah, and if you look at what's happening with banks and building societies and them not passing on the interest rates to savers, but passing on very quickly to those who are borrowing, there is a feeling, isn't there, that there's a lot of things out of control here and not working in the interest of the public.
But some people would say it's all right, Labour, Sir Keir Starmer, hammering the Tories on this, but they're still not clear on how you guys would do better or fix it.
Well, we've come up with a clear plan, particularly on mortgages, for example. We want to make sure that actually every lender is required to sign up to the scheme. There's about 1 million borrowers at the moment that aren't covered by the government scheme that was announced earlier this week. We want to make sure that borrowers have the flexibility to go to interest only, have the ability to extend the mortgages, make sure none of this affects their credit ratings. And I think the overall narrative that we would say is that actually, when you've had the chaos of the last 12 months, the time the government crashed the economy, we would put things on a much sounder footing. We'd bring some stability back.
But, the Tories have announced something very positive today. Universal credit payments increased. That's going to make quite a difference for families.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I think the point we would probably make is actually, about 40% of people claiming universal credit are in work, and clearly work isn't paying as it should, and we've got to get to an economy where actually people's ability to earn is matched by the ability for companies to pay the wages. We have had a long period of wages failing to keep up with the cost of living, which is why many of the things we're talking about today have become so acute.
And talking of acute transport problems, of course, always hitting our guest. James Sunderland is, however, here. Welcome. Thanks for making it. It's always a struggle to get through Paddington to get to us for PMQs on this Wednesday. We were just saying about the, difficulties mounting up for Rishi Sunak in terms of the economy. The economy's stupid. Remember that watch phrase from Clinton. I guess that will be Starmer's attack line today.
Yeah, we don't know what he's going to say, but ultimately it makes sense. Last week, of course, it was a privileges committee. This week it's probably the economy. I've no doubt at all the Prime Minister is ready for what's coming. The Conservatives are doing a great job in attempting to fix the problem.
But they haven't got long to do it if they're going to make a difference at the polls.
Well, agreed. And actually, the economy is it for me. It's the most important thing for my constituents, money in pocket. Cost of living crisis. And I think we have to do everything possible to bring the cost of living down, to help with mortgages as best we can, which we are doing, and also just to make life a little bit easier for people in the UK.
As best we can. Interesting phrase, because, of course, we had Rishi Sunak say, I've got it. I've got this problem. But it is, of course, up to the bank in terms of monetary policy, and they are indicating they're going to try and keep squeezing until particularly the underlying rate of inflation is addressed. That provides a political difficulty for Number 10.
Well, the important thing is to get inflation down. I mean, that is the driver for all of our monetarist policy right now.
At all costs?
And we have to get it down because it means so much to so many people. If prices keep rising, the impact upon the poor, the list goes on. So the focus on interest rates is absolutely the right thing to do. Monetarist policy is proven to work historically.
Which is interest rate setting.
It is, yeah. And actually, as uncomfortable as it is for many people, mortgage owners in particular, it's really important that we get inflation down first. That is what people want us to do. It's calm, stable government, and that's what we're doing.
But, Justin, you want to see more intervention, don't you, for families in terms of mortgages?
Yeah,
more support, which the government says that is not the answer here.
Well, there's about 1 million families who aren't going to get any support at the moment, and the banks and building societies haven't signed up to the government scheme. We would force them to do that. Look, I think that the way the mortgage market works these days is very different to how it did the last time we had sky-high interest rates. We've got a lot of people facing very steep increases overnight because of the way discounted rates work.
This is the deals where people are tied in for 2 or 5 years, which are coming to an end.
As someone who is
coming
to the end, you are being asked to find an awful lot more money very suddenly, and that's a real shock. And what I'm afraid we're seeing is a group of people being particularly hit very hard, and actually the rest of the economy is not being affected by this. And I do wonder whether we need to look at other methods of trying to get inflation down.
Let's also reflect on what it's costing business. Thames Water, the boss stood down with immediate effect yesterday. We've just had a statement saying it's working constructively with its shareholders to try and get further funding. We understand it cannot actually service its 14 billion debt because of the high interest rates it's having to pay now. And we've got an urgent question after PMQs on this. Business as well as households are hurting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Thames Valley MP, so have a clear interest in this at the moment. I haven't dug into the detail as yet. I will do, and I'm going to head back for the statement after this. But the important thing is that much debt seems to be, quite excessive, and one wonders about the competence of the company.
And other companies. I mean, Ofwat is warning that, there could be issues with Yorkshire Water, Portsmouth Water.
Yep.
What do you make of the suggestion that there will be, not a nationalisation, but certainly brought back under public control, special administrative regime, an SAR? I mean, could that, signal perhaps a reconsideration of public utilities being under tighter government control?
Well, no Conservative MP is going to support nationalisation or renationalisation. I'm not going to do it. I mean, it was privatised many years ago. It's in private ownership right now, quite rightly so, in my view.
Really? Even though it's the China Investment Corporation and the Abu Dhabi Investment Fund that are shareholders? Is that part of the problem, that it's foreign-owned, effectively?
I'm not sure that's the problem. I mean, it's maybe foreign-owned because it's British-managed, and ultimately we have to hold people to account. If you've got bad leadership, if you've got incompetent leadership, we need to hold them to account. So what we need to be doing is finding out the facts of this first, and then making a judgment. But I'm pretty certain that the government will do what it can, again, to intervene and to assist people.
Justin, would you like to see nationalisation?
Well, look, it would cost an awful lot.
Rhetorical question.
Funny old thing.
Just before we cross the PMQs.
It would cost an awful lot of money. I mean, the obvious problem here is that this company is not working in the public interest, whether it's nationalised or privately owned. It's got massive debts. It's not able to deliver the basic functions that a company like any water provider should be doing. Something's gone very seriously wrong. The model is clearly in trouble because this is not an isolated incident. I think it's very important that we hear what the government have got to say about this, but it certainly needs greater control over what's happening. The fact that it's got billions of pounds of debts, has been paying out hundreds of millions of pounds in dividends, and they can't deliver a basic service. It's got to raise some serious questions.
Generally, we're hearing that water bills could be rising by up to 40%.
Yeah, and when we're talking about all the cost of living issues, the fact that this company has paid itself hundreds of millions of pounds to shareholders, and yet it's the consumer who's going to have to pay the price, makes it all sound very wrong to me.
Slight delay on PMQs, I think. I don't know if we can actually bring up the shot there of the chamber. I think everyone is waiting for the session to start. But yes, there is Speaker Lindsay Hoyle on his feet. Let's have a quick listen in. Just coming up for you now.
I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole House in thanking John and wishing him all the best in the future. We now start with questions to Prime Minister, Dr Luke Evans.
Number one, Mr Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, today we'll see the second reading of the Holocaust Memorial Bill. For decades, survivors like the late Sir Ben Helfgott showed the extraordinary courage to share their testimonies so that we would never forget. I hope the whole House will unite today to get this memorial built and put those testimonies at the heart of our democracy for generations to come. Mr Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr Luke Evans.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And for 3 years since I've been elected, I've been campaigning to improve health facilities in my community. And I'm pleased to see significant investment in Leicestershire with £14 million for a CDC in Hinckley and part of £20 billion for hospital improvements for the LRI and Glenfield. But I'm looking for a hat-trick of health in Hinckley. And what I'm looking for is a day case unit. The money is already there. It's tied up in red tape. I've raised this with the Health Secretary. Would the Prime Minister look to see what he can do? And would he come and like to open the CDC next year in Hinckley?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm delighted that since its opening last month, the Hinckley CDC has already delivered, I believe, over 300 additional tests to the local community. My honourable friend will know that it's for the local health authorities to determine how to allocate the NHS budget in their area, but I have no doubt that he will continue to make the case for them for a day case unit in his community.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, can I join your tribute to John and wish him all the best on behalf of the House, and join the Prime Minister in his comments about the Holocaust Memorial. I'd also like to wish Muslims across the country a happy Eid. And Mr Speaker, last week the Labour Party lost Margaret McDonough, our first female General Secretary, and a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Margaret provided guidance, leadership and loyal friendship to so many in the Labour movement. And it wasn't long after I started in this job that Margaret was at my door, and I will be forever grateful for the advice and support that she gave me. We will all miss her terribly. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, his party spent thousands of pounds on adverts attacking plans to build 300,000 new homes a year. At the same time, his housing minister says it's Tory party policy to build 300,000 new homes a year. So is he for building 300,000 new homes a year or against it?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can just remind the honourable gentleman of our record since being in office. 2.2 million additional homes, Mr. Speaker. Housing starts double the number we inherited from the Labour Party. More homes meeting the decent home standards. Housing supply up 10% in the last year that we have figures for. And in the last year we had figures for, we also saw a 20-year high in the number of first-time buyers, Mr. Speaker. That's a Conservative government delivering for this country.
Mr. Speaker, it wasn't a difficult question. Can he point to a single person in housing, in construction, anywhere, who thinks he'll actually hit his target of 300,000 new homes a year? Anyone?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the record is that in the last 3 years, we've delivered almost record numbers of new home building in every one of those years. But Mr. Speaker, it talks about targets, so let's be clear. I promised to put local people in control of new housing. I delivered on that policy within weeks of becoming Prime Minister. But I am confused from the honourable gentleman, because first, the Shadow Community and Housing Secretary said communities should have control. But then he then said we should get the targets back and disempower local people. I do want to give him some advice. I don't think it's local people that are the problem. It's a Labour Party policy.
Mr. Speaker, presumably if he could have identified a single person who thought he'd hit his target, he would have told us. And there you have the problem. 1 minute he says he's for building new houses, the next he's campaigning against them. And the truth is, far from delivering, since he crumbled to his backbenchers and scrapped mandatory targets, house building has collapsed. He knows it, they know it, and every expert is telling them it. Why didn't he just admit it? He's not going to get anywhere near his target, is he?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman now claims that he supports house building, especially on the green belt. But unfortunately for him, it's good that he agrees that he does believe that now. But unfortunately for him, the Shadow Deputy Prime Minister, the Shadow Minister for Women, the Shadow Health, Justice, Defence, Business, Northern Ireland and Scotland ministers are all united against more house building in their areas, Mr. Speaker. I have to say to them, though, Mr. Speaker, I would say to them, though, they don't have to worry too much because he's never actually kept a promise he's made.
Mr. Speaker, you can tell from his answer, not answer, his body language, he's actually given up. He's given up. And his failure isn't just shattering the dream of those who desperately want to own their own home, it's also hitting those who already have a mortgage. Because of their economic chaos, mortgage holders will be £2,900 a year poorer. How can they ever look the British people in the eye again and claim to be the party of home ownership?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I don't think he's noticed that his Shadow Housing Secretary doesn't actually agree with his new policy of concreting over the green belt, Mr. Speaker. She's been campaigning against developments in her own constituency. She said she wanted to prevent urban sprawl and provide green space for local people. I think that's quite sensible, but it's classic Labour, Mr. Speaker, saying one thing here, doing another thing elsewhere. You simply can't trust a word they say.
At least he isn't claiming they are the party of home ownership anymore, because we are. Mr. Speaker, he's given up. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister says he's 100% on it. But his definition of 100% on it is to gently ask the banks to do the right thing. His softly approach, refusing to put mandatory measures in place, risks leaving 1 million households without support. How many will have to lose their homes before he'll stand up for the people his party have pushed into economic misery?
Mr. Speaker, in fact, the vast majority of the mortgage market is now covered by the new mortgage charter that the Chancellor's brought in. That is delivering practical help to mortgage holders, allowing them to extend their terms, switch to interest-only mortgage, and actually saving them hundreds of pounds a month. So instead of scaring them, actually, there is now practical support in place. But it's right that he raised home ownership, Mr. Speaker. That's why we, on this side of the House, introduced a 95% mortgage guarantee scheme. It's why we introduced the first homes and shared ownership schemes to get people onto the housing ladder. And crucially, Mr. Speaker, it's why we cut stamp duty. So now what we've seen is the highest number of first-time buyers in 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That is twice the number that the Labour Party ever managed.
Mr. Speaker, it's sort of housing crisis. What crisis with this Prime Minister? He must be the only person in the country who thinks that enough houses have been built in the last 13 years. And whether it's those dreaming of getting the keys to their first home or those already with mortgages, the ambitions of families across the country have been crushed by his failing Tory government. House building at its lowest rate since the war because he can't stand up to his own party. A Tory mortgage bombshell because they crashed the economy. Millions left without support because he won't make lenders put families first. Rather than lecturing the rest of the country and holding their nerve, why doesn't he try and locate his?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as always, he hasn't actually taken the time to understand the detail of what we're doing. So, again, I'm happy to explain it again, Mr. Speaker, because it's right that we provide support for mortgage owners, which is why we improve the generosity of the support for mortgage interest scheme. It's why we've introduced a new mortgage charter, which, by the way, goes much more farther than the Labour Party policy on protecting mortgage holders does. On house building, we're proud to protect the green belt and invest millions more in developing brownfield sites. But, Mr. Speaker, the simple truth is, that's what I said I would do, and that's what we've delivered, and that is the difference between us. I deliver what I promise, he just breaks his.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour-run Kirklees Council's local plan is seeing hundreds of homes built on greenfield sites, but the agreed developer levies, the Section 106 agreements, which are supposedly for local infrastructure spending, seem to be disappearing into a black hole. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that agreed infrastructure levies from developers shouldn't be going into a general slush fund? They should be spent on local roads, local schools and local health services for the communities impacted by those developments.
My honourable friend raises an excellent point, and that's why the government is reforming the Section 106 payment system to ensure that new development is matched by new infrastructure, because the current system sees far too little of the developers' profits going to build new schools, hospitals or transport infrastructure. It's also too slow and plagued by uncertainties, and that particularly hampers smaller local developers. So it will be replaced by a new non-negotiable, local determined infrastructure levy, which will deliver exactly what the honourable gentleman and others want to see: investment in local communities.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to start by paying tribute to SNP legend Winnie Ewan and Scotland men's national team former manager Craig Brown, who both so sadly passed in recent days, and to all Muslims who are celebrating Eid Mubarak. Mr. Speaker, on Sunday the Prime Minister patronised the public when he told them that in the face of ever-increasing mortgage bills, that they simply need to hold their nerve. What a nerve. So may I ask him, the near billionaire, when was the last time that he struggled to pay a bill?
Mr. Speaker, The reason that mortgage rates are rising is because of inflation, Mr. Speaker. That is the root cause, which is why it's absolutely the right policy to tackle, halve inflation and reduce it back to target. Now, that does mean that we do have to make difficult decisions. It does mean we have to be patient while the impact of those decisions actually has an impact. But in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, as I was explaining previously, we are taking practical steps to support mortgage holders across the United Kingdom, particularly through the SMI scheme and the new mortgage charter.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, that answer confirms what we already know, that this Prime Minister is out of touch and the Tory party is soon to be out of time. And what the public really want is change. But in a week where the Conservative Party and indeed the Labour Party both refuse to accept proposals for public sector pay rises, whilst at the same time accepting the economic damage of Brexit, is it not the case that Westminster does not offer the people real change nor real hope for the future?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman just exposes the complete economic illiteracy of the SNP's position. His first question talks about the challenges posed on ordinary families by higher interest rates caused by higher inflation. What does his next question do? Support a policy that would increase government borrowing and make the situation worse. Mr. Speaker, it just demonstrates completely candidly why the SNP's approach to economic management is simply not fit for anyone in the United Kingdom.
Mr. Speaker, local police stations are a key part of communities such as Aldridge in my constituency, and that's why I continue to make the case to Labour's Police and Crime Commissioner to save and strengthen the role of Aldridge Police Station, not force it to close. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that any such closure would be reckless, and Police and Crime Commissioners should be working with local communities and local police teams to provide greater certainty, particularly given the extra 1,376 extra police officers this government has put into the West Midlands?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to hear about the extra police officers that the government has funded in my right honourable friend's community, but I am concerned to hear about the planned closure of Aldridge Police Station. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for raising such an important issue. I know it's one on which she is championing her constituents. As she will know, unfortunately, this is a decision of the locally elected Labour Police and Crime Commissioner, and I would join her in urging them to think again.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
The Prime Minister's solution to inflation is to push families into poverty while letting corporate profits pile up. Economic illiteracy. The IMF said this week that the way to cut inflation is for companies to cut their profit margins. It's corporate greed fueling inflation, not workers' need for fair pay. Can he explain to the 1 in 5 people in Wales facing hunger because they cannot afford to buy decent food why they must pay his price for lowering inflation?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, actually, my honourable friend the Chancellor met with all the economic regulators this morning, and they'll be making an announcement later about their plans to ensure fairness of pricing and supply chain to ease the burden on consumers. But I'm glad she brought up the IMF when it comes to tackling inflation, because actually the IMF, in their words, strongly endorsed our plan to halve inflation, and they called our steps both decisive and responsible.
Jonathan Lord.
Mr. Speaker, as my right honourable friend knows, I've been liaising closely with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities and with the Treasury with regard to the terrible news of Woking Council's recent Section 114 notice. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that in this scenario, the vulnerable must be protected and that the local councillors of all parties need to work together to try to put the council's finances back on the right track?
Prime Minister.
I know my honourable friend is a great champion for his Woking residents, and as he knows, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up has intervened in this authority and appointed commissioners to ensure that decisions are taken that provide the best outcomes for residents, including the most vulnerable and indeed the public purse. I agree with him that local councillors should be working together with the commissioners to put the council's finances in order. The commissioners will submit their first report to the Secretary of State, setting out progress on the Council's path to improvement and financial sustainability, and I look forward with him to seeing further progress.
Sir Christopher Bryant.
Thank you. The Prime Minister has had responsibility for the UK
economy now for 1,323 days, and he's delivered. He's delivered the largest national peacetime debt ever, the largest tax burden since the Second World War, the highest core inflation since 1991, the fastest interest rate rises since 1989, and the biggest fall in living standards in our history. So will he stop lecturing my constituents about holding their nerve, ditch the lame excuses, and admit that he is literally the worst person to be leading this country through a cost of living crisis?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, again, what do we hear from the party opposite? Only ideas that would make the situation far worse, Mr. Speaker. It's as simple as that. The honourable gentleman has sat there and supported plans to borrow tens of billions of pounds more. That would make inflation worse. The honourable gentleman has sat there and said that we should not stand up to unaffordable union pay demands. That would make the situation worse. And the honourable gentleman has sat there and supported plans to not exploit our domestic sources of energy, Mr. Speaker, imperiling our energy security. Those are all things that would make not just the situation worse for British families today, but for years into the future, and that's why this Conservative government will keep doing the right thing to support them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents rely on many nearby hospitals. Milton Keynes, where this government has committed to a new women and children's hospital. Stoke Mandeville, who has just completed the build of a new children's A&E. But also Wickham, where infrastructure and maintenance issues in the ageing tower is preventing around 2,000 operations a year from going ahead. My local trust has a plan for a £200 million new clinical centre at Wickham Hospital. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, work with myself and Buckinghamshire colleagues to make that a reality?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. Whilst he knows that we are no longer inviting further schemes to join the new hospital programme, I can tell him that in the future new schemes will be considered through the rolling programme of capital investment in hospital infrastructure. That will secure the building of new hospitals beyond 2030 and mean future investment to upgrade the NHS estate across the country. Now, future plans for that will obviously be set out in spending reviews and fiscal events, but in the meantime, I know that he will continue to make the passionate case for Wickham Hospital, and I join him in that.
Chris Elm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hundreds of steel workers are outside Parliament today, and some are in the gallery, calling on the Prime Minister to act now to back our vital steel industry before it is too late. So will he confirm today that he will match the ambition of the Labour Party and our international competitors to deliver competitive energy prices, invest in green steel production, use UK steel in our procurement systems, and protect us from dirty steel imports by introducing climate measures? And when will he get on with protecting and supporting the industry?
Mr. Speaker, we're proud to support the steel industry and value the contribution that it makes to this country, which is why we've put in place the energy intensive industry scheme that provides hundreds of millions of pounds of support to steel companies with their energy bills. We've also introduced the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund so that companies can apply for capital grants to help them with the transition. We are taking forward plans in the Treasury for carbon border adjustment mechanisms to ensure a level playing field, and it's why, Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, that I stepped in to support financially a steel company in Wales.
Sir James Duddridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite 5 years of lobbying, sadly the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association International branch will leave the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, you know this is a great concern to the House, although perhaps something a little niche for our constituents. It is important. They need special status. The government haven't granted that by way of a short bill or an amendment to an existing bill. And could the Prime Minister at this late stage, this month, do something about this? Because otherwise they'll be gone, never to come back.
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom values the work of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has made clear that he does not want the CPA International to relocate. He's written to them in March to confirm that officials from the FCDO would work with the CPA to find a mutually acceptable solution to the status issue, and I look forward to seeing progress.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, your constituents and mine, I think, have been made a promise by the Prime Minister. Inflation at or below 5% by the end of this year. So I want to ask the Prime Minister, what will happen if he fails to meet that promise? Will it be yet more ranting on about the Labour Party, or will it be the general election my constituents crave?
No, Mr. Speaker, we are sticking to the course of bringing inflation down, Mr. Speaker. I think what the Labour Party need to understand is that requires making difficult and tough decisions, Mr. Speaker. It requires prioritising. It requires being able to say no when people come looking, asking you to borrow more money. Those are the type of responsible decisions that I will make and the Conservative government will make because they're the right ones for the country.
Mr. Speaker, for over 160 years, Southport Pier has been at the centre of our visitor economy, welcoming visitors from far and wide, including Chorley, Mr. Speaker. It stood the tests of time, except for the mismanagement of Labour-controlled Sefton Council, who've closed our pier. Businesses are concerned it will have a huge impact on tourism. Will the Prime Minister condemn these actions and support my campaign and efforts to work with this Conservative government to get our pier open?
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome my honourable friend's commitment to the important community assets in his constituency, such as the historic Grade 2 listed Southport Pier. And I am pleased to say that he is working and succeeded in getting the government to provide £2 million as part of the Coastal Community Fund to undertake improvements in the pier. And that's alongside the landmark £35.5 million town deal for Southport, which is the second largest town deal anywhere in the country.
Samantha Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the first opportunity that I've had to put a question to the Prime Minister for the residents of the City of Chester. So, why does the Prime Minister think it's acceptable for sewage to be pumped into the beautiful River Dee that flows through Chester for the next 27 years?
Mr. Speaker, of course it's not acceptable, and that's why this government has gone further than any other government in tackling this issue, committing to monitor 100% of storm overflows, an investment programme of £56 billion to upgrade infrastructure, and enshrining in law strict targets, as well as introducing unlimited fines for water companies. But when it came to talking about those policies in this House, the party opposite couldn't even be bothered to turn up and vote for them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later today, Parliament will welcome apprentices from around the UK who were working in the aerospace industry. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting Callum and Brittany, who are both apprentices in my constituency of Wolverhampton North East at Collins Aerospace. Would he join me in celebrating apprenticeships in the aerospace industry and encourage colleagues to attend and meet their apprentices?
Well, can I join with my honourable friend in both celebrating everyone doing an apprentice and encourage everyone to go and meet theirs later on today and pay tribute to Callum and Brittany in particular. And she's absolutely right to highlight the importance of the aerospace industry, particularly because of our new defence cooperation agreement with Italy and Japan to build a new generation of fighter aircraft. Thousands of new jobs will be created across the country. Many of those will be through apprentices, and that's an example of this Conservative government providing opportunities for the next generation.
Ian Mans.
Mr. Speaker, Prime Minister, last year 1.7 million children missed more than 10% of their schooling. 125,000 children were absent more than they were in school, and a further 140,000 children were missing from formal schooling completely. This is both a safeguarding and an educational catastrophe, and is happening on the Prime Minister's watch. Yesterday, the Schools Minister told the Education Select Committee that primary legislation was required to initiate a national register for children missing from education so we can find out where they are. Will the Prime Minister commit to bringing forward necessary legislation to combat this crisis for our children as a matter of urgency?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the honourable gentleman that children missing school is a tragedy and it's incredibly damaging for educational outcomes, which is why during the pandemic and afterwards we invested £5 billion to help children catch up with lost learning. It's important that we continue to deliver on those plans, and we will of course make sure that we work with the sector to have more children attending school more often.
Shetland Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Economic recovery and reconstruction will be vitally important to Ukraine when it comes to rebuilding a free and sovereign nation. So will my right honourable friend help galvanise the expertise of our UK's private sector to help strengthen Ukraine's recovery and their economic prospects after this devastating war?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, time and time again, Ukraine has shown its ability to rapidly harness innovation and creativity, and I know that its economic recovery will be no different. And my right honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight that private sector expertise and investment will be critical to that recovery. And I was pleased that over 400 world-leading companies pledged to back Ukraine's reconstruction at the very successful recovery conference that the UK hosted the other week. We're doing our part as well, Mr. Speaker, with a $3 billion World Bank loan guarantee on top of all the other investment that we've put in place. And I think what the conference showed is that there's enormous momentum across the world to support Ukraine's recovery, and that recovery and ambition is being led by the United Kingdom.
Charlotte David.
Mr. Speaker, a university student in Lewisham has seen her rent rise by £200 a month due to the mortgage rate increases. She is now at risk of homelessness and she can't return to the family home. She has no choice but to use food banks, even though she has 2 part-time jobs. Not only is she falling behind in her studies, she's falling further into debt and she's falling into depression. What does the Prime Minister say to constituents like mine who are paying the dual price of this government's cost of living crisis and mortgage rates crisis?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've taken significant action to help families across the country, most notably by taxing the windfall profits of energy companies and using that money to pay around half of a typical family, including all of her constituents' energy bills. That support is worth £1,500, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased that energy bills are forecast to fall £430 when the price cap resets in a couple of days. But beyond that, there's considerable support for the most vulnerable in our society, including £900 of cost of living payments for those on universal credit and additional support for pensioners and indeed disabled people, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Bailey.
Speaker, we are heading into the 5th week of Sandwell Labour's refuse strikes. We've had flying pickets, we've had reports of the GMB blocking ambulance workers getting out of their depot as a result of their picket lines, and the PCC trying to encourage the police not to police it. Can I ask my right honourable friend to ensure that he convenes a meeting urgently so we can resolve this, and perhaps he'll join me and tell Labour politicians, particularly one in particular, grow a spine and put people before your paymasters.
We've done very well, don't spoil it now, Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend put it very well, but illustrated exactly the issue. Because, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party is unable to stand up to its union paymasters and back our plans to introduce minimum service and safety levels in critical industries. That's the type of practical action that supports working families. It's one that the Labour Party isn't strong enough to actually support.
Welcome back, Donald.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. After events in Russia at the weekend, it is unclear what the future holds for the Wagner Group. But what can never be washed away is the catalogue of crimes they've committed across Africa, the Middle East and, of course, in Ukraine. But despite all of that, Mr. Speaker, the government doesn't yet have a permanent Cabinet Office official to coordinate all of the organs of government to pursue the criminals in the Wagner Group. Will he appoint one? And crucially, will he fund collecting evidence of Wagner Group war crimes that have been committed across the world so that these criminals, no matter what happens, can be brought to justice in future?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have consistently condemned the Wagner Group and we carefully monitor their actions in Ukraine and the wider world, as the Honourable gentleman mentions. We have designated both the Wagner Group and its leader under our sanctions regime already, and we also support international mechanisms which hold individual mercenaries in the Wagner Group to account for violations of international law. But I also reassure him that we are working very closely with our partners to counter the malign use of such proxies by Russia and more generally across the continent.
Paul Bristow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday night, an illegal traveller encampment was established on Bretton Park. On Saturday, the Mutual of Bretton Festival is due to take place on Breton Park. This House passed legislation that gives more powers to police to tackle these illegal encampments. Will the Prime Minister make it clear today from the dispatch box that he expects police to use those powers on these encampments that blight public spaces and public parks in places like Peterborough?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we absolutely recognise the misery that unauthorised encampments can cause to local communities, and that's why we've delivered on our manifesto commitment to give police the powers they need to tackle those people on unauthorised encampments who are causing harm. Now, of course, how the police use these powers is an operational matter for chief constables, but we wouldn't have legislated for them if we didn't expect them to use them, Mr. Speaker, and I am told that Home Office officials are liaising regularly with the National Police Chiefs Council on this exact matter.
Final question, Martin Docker to use.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the past couple of days, yet again, we have been reminded that a member of the other House was appointed contrary to the recommendations of MI5. And in the Channel 4 film, that even the monarch was actually asked to be involved because Whitehall officials were so opposed, given that they were deemed a security risk to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he agree with MI5 or with his predecessor that peer should still be in the other House?
Prime Minister.
If Mr. Speaker, for obvious reasons, I'll talk in more general terms. With the House of Lords Appointment Commission vets crossbench and party political life peerage nominations to the House of Lords, and where appropriate, seeks advice from government departments and agencies, and were a Prime Minister to recommend a peerage against the Commission's formal advice, the House of Lords Appointment Commission has previously undertaken that it would write publicly to the relevant Parliamentary Select Committee.
Completes Prime Minister's questions.
We have this session of PMQs dominated in terms of the exchanges between Sunak and Starmer on housing. Not the economy in detail, but just to remind you, in terms of the exchanges, Sir Keir Starmer claiming the Tories weren't the party of home ownership anymore. Labour was now that party, said to Labour cheers, but Rishi Sunak countering, I don't think he's noticed his shadow housing secretary doesn't agree with the new policy of concreting over the green belt. We should say we are going to return to the Commons shortly because we are expecting an urgent question on Thames Water and indications that perhaps it may have to be under emergency government control, renationalisation effectively. But we'll wait and see on that coming up fairly shortly.
Yeah, there was quite a good line, actually, from Keir Starmer. He said it a couple of times about Rishi Sunak. He's given up. He's given up.
Yeah.
Oh, we have this urgent question.
Yeah, let's return now to the Commons. Jim McMahon, the Shadow Environment Minister.
To the urgent question. Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to make a statement on the financial resilience of the water industry.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Water is what makes life possible on our planet, and it is essential for our health and well-being, as well as our economy, including the production of food and clean energy. The government is taking significant steps to ensure the water industry is delivering the outcomes bill payers expect and deserve. Water companies have invested £190 billion since privatisation in 1989. In April, the government published the Plan for Water, bringing together more investment, stronger regulation and tougher enforcement capacity for regulators and on those who pollute. Ofwat and the government take the financial resilience of the water sector very seriously. Ofwat are the independent economic regulator for the water sector, including responsibility for the financial resilience of the water sector. The sector as a whole is financially resilient. Ofwat continues to monitor the financial position of all the key water and wastewater companies. Ofwat reports annually on the sector's financial resilience, and Ofwat's latest annual Monitoring Financial Resilience report shows that the water sector is financially resilient. Market confidence in the sector is also demonstrated by new acquisitions, such as Pennon's purchase of Bristol Water, and by shareholders being willing to inject new capital. Ofwat has taken steps in recent years to strengthen the sector's position. This includes action to update the ring-fencing provisions in water company licences to better safeguard the interests of customers and barring water companies from making payouts to shareholders and removing money or assets from the business if they lose their investment credit grade rating. Ofwat has outlined that water companies must be transparent about how executive pay and dividends align to delivery of services to customers, including environmental performance. And since privatisation, total capital investment has outstripped dividends by 250%. On the 20th of March 2023, Ofwat announced new powers that will enable it to take enforcement action against water companies that do not link dividend payments to performance for both customers and the environment. And in December 2022, Ofwat strengthens its powers on executive pay awards by setting out that shareholders and not customers will fund pay awards where companies do not demonstrate their decisions or pay awards reflect overall performance. We support Ofwat's work and we urge all water companies to take this opportunity to review their policies. The scale of government commitment for the water industry is highlighted by the Integrated Plan for Water and our commitments to the financial resilience of the sector in delivering for customers and the environment.
Thank you. Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, can I thank you for granting this urgent question, but I have to say, again, it's a concern that the Secretary of State didn't proactively make a statement to the House on an issue of such importance. And I just say, where is the Secretary of State? Literally, one of the largest water companies in Britain potentially is going to go to the wall, and the Secretary of State is missing in action. And it was clear to anyone looking on that a culture that allowed vital investment in ending the sewage scandal and in tackling water leaks sacrificed in favour of a gold rush for shareholders just was never sustainable. Now, just last year, as raw human sewage was being pumped out across the country, £1.4 billion was paid out to shareholders. And now all that was warned is coming to pass. Leaks are leading to water shortages, sewage dumping pollutes our rivers, our lakes, our seas, and the only thing on the up is debt at £60 billion. The Conservative Party cycle of privatising profit, usually for multi-billion-pound foreign sovereign wealth funds, and then nationalising risk, just isn't sustainable, nor is it a fair deal for working people. Now, the news that we're seeing is a result of the Conservative Party's failed profit above public interest experiment, handing over the water industry at a knockdown price, together with the entire infrastructure serving the nation, over to private enterprise. Almost unique, for instance, when rail was privatised, the PRACs weren't sold off. But with water, the lot was handed over with little safeguards for our national interest, our national security or bill payers. So can I ask the Minister, when was her department first made aware of the financial situation at Thames Water? Has her department had any reason to believe that those responsible at Thames Water wouldn't be able to meet their licence obligations or legal obligations? If this means a taxpayer-funded bailout, how much will that cost and how will it be paid for? And what assessment has she made on the liability of UK pension funds who are invested in Thames and other water companies considered at risk? And given where we are, does she confirm today her confidence for the financial regulator? And finally, given what we see with Thames Water today, does she have any concerns about any other water companies, or does she consider this to be an isolated case? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just first of all, in our DEFRA department, we have our individual portfolios. I am the Water Minister, and the Secretary of State has full confidence in her Minister in sending them to the dispatch box. I just want to make the point too, in terms of the debt issue that was raised there by the Shadow Minister. Just for information, debt to equity fell last year by 4% in the water industry, actually making it more resilient, Mr. Speaker. And, just to put it on the record, Since privatisation, capital investment in the water industry has been...
So this, just to remind you, is the urgent question posed there by Jim McMahon on the issue of the water companies, but Thames Water in particular, just to outline the problems. Thames Water saying it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure new funding. This is after reports suggested it was unable to service its £14 billion debts, and the government, we understand, drawing up contingency plans for the company's emergency nationalisation. So Jim McMahon, they're asking who is going to pay out for any bailout, bearing in mind, of course, that we have sovereign wealth funds from China and Abu Dhabi who are invested in Thames Water. We still have our two MPs, Justin Madders and James Sunderland, here. A bit dry, if you pardon the pun, but a real question for the public. You know, are we, the taxpayers, going to bail this lot out?
Yeah, it's a bit dry, but an important issue, particularly for those in Thames Water. I mean, what I would say is that this has come to the attention of the government. The government's dealing with it at the moment. I think it's not yet clear what the plan might be. But as we saw previously with the banks and other industries, it stands to reason that the government might need to come forward and help Thames Water.
So therefore, why not Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State? Why wasn't she at the dispatch box? As Jim McMahon said, this is a really important question.
Well, I don't know. It's a simple answer. I mean, ministers travel a lot. She's probably away. I think it's entirely reasonable.
It is the UK's biggest water company, Thames Water.
No, I totally agree with that.
Ramifications for millions of customers here.
But Diaries are very mature. No doubt she has business elsewhere. Ministers are very busy. They travel a lot. As we've seen recently, Deputy Prime Minister covers the Prime Minister, so it's quite normal, I think, for ministers to deputise.
Yeah, and she is the Water Minister, she's just pointed out. Yeah.
Fair enough. Just rewinding back to the questions. Well, it was all about house building, wasn't it? Is that what you expected from Keir Starmer to go in on that attack line?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to make the paucity of house supply in this country a big issue at the next election. I have to say, just coming back to the water question, you know, the biggest water company in the UK in real trouble. I would expect the Secretary of State to be in Parliament trying to work out a solution to this, not travelling around the country. And obviously, James doesn't know where she is, but I think you know, it's of that significance that she needed to be there.
Well,
but going back to PMQs, look, I mean, we don't even know because he was asked twice, Rishi Sunak, and he didn't answer whether the government do have a house building target or not. And I think about what my constituents come to see me about every week, and it is very often coming down to a lack of supply of affordable housing. We've absolutely got to tackle that as a country.
Yeah, I mean, but Rishi Sunak did say, you know, we've got the highest number of first-time buyers in many years. That's something that has been achieved by the Tory government.
Well, look, we also have the lowest rate of house building since the Second World War. That is not a sustainable position. We don't even know if the government have a target to build houses anymore. If the government can't set a target, we can't expect there to be new houses coming through. It is a crisis. We've got 100,000 families in temporary accommodation at the moment. That is something that is an absolute disgrace in our society. We absolutely have to build more houses that people can afford to live in.
Is there a particular problem here, though, for MPs from all sides, in that, you know, when you have the big housing plan coming through for your patch, particularly if it's near a green belt, you've got constituents that say, we don't want it here, and that poses a particular problem for individuals.
We want it, but not on our doorstep.
No, look, I understand local people will always want to have their say, but actually I think that's more about where all the power lies, and it's very much the developers who pick and choose where they want to build. They want to build a certain type of house in a certain place that will maximise their profits. Yeah. What we're talking about is actually getting more control for local authorities so they can dictate the type of houses they're built and where they're built to actually meet local needs.
And Michael Gove touched on this, didn't he, about, you know, the sorts of houses that are being built or designed, and, you know, that they're perhaps aesthetically not really what's wanted or needed, and the quality of the building as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of issues there, but if you go to Bracknell or Wokingham, for example...
yeah, I can imagine the housing estates you've got near you.
Well, the important thing is that those councils have met the local plan every year for the last 15 years, Conservative-run councils. So, for me, it was a very interesting attack line from Keir Starmer, because the evidence would suggest that the Conservatives are building houses and have been building houses. If you look at the record, you've got Right to Buy, Help to Buy, First Homes Scheme, stamp duty reductions. I mean, the record proves itself, and I think in many ways the Conservatives are the party of home ownership and will continue to be.
What did you think, though, when Keir Starmer asked you about this earlier, Justin, said about your Prime Minister? He's given up. He said it twice. He's given up. That is going to resonate with a lot of people who think he's too soft.
Well, I think it was a pretty weak, disingenuous attack line because I think the evidence against suggests otherwise. I mean, if you look at Rishi Sunak here today, he was pretty good at the dispatch box. The more rattled he is, in my view, the better he is. So Keir Starmer, who comes at him with his salvos, Rishi is not just deflecting it, he's firing back, and that's really important.
He wasn't as angry as his Tory colleague, was he, who had a big outburst about strikes?
Well, I mean, Rishi Sunak has been the Prime Minister for not a great deal of time. I mean, he certainly isn't tired. He's just getting going, and I think that you've got a good Prime Minister there. He's calm, he's cautious, he's decent, he's hard-working,
The problem
and he's very clever.
though, James, is he doesn't have a lot of time to get going. You know, he's got to be out there, he's got to be sprinting. He can't be jogging along, not if you've got an election next year.
I think it would be quite wrong for the government to adopt policies that see them, you know, bring in fads and deals and incentivisation just to win the next election. What the government has to do is to provide calm, responsible government by doing the right thing in terms of policies, and that's what they're doing.
But is that therein the problem, that he came back with this line about the mortgage charter and that, you know, we are taking these measures to help people? You know, those facing the mortgage increase coming through from their building society are thinking, what help? I'm being, you know, shown here hundreds of pounds of extra income going away in my mortgage. They'll be blaming the government, not the building society.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, of course, Bank of England sets the interest rates.
Not the government, yeah.
And you'll notice this week that Jeremy Hunt did come to the dispatch box very quickly after the latest rate rise, and the new mortgage charter is pretty evident of it. I think it's a good bit of work, and I think...
But wasn't it announced in December? It's a re-announcement of what was put in place in December, isn't it?
Well, it's more of the same, I think. I think there's a few new tweaks in there, but the important thing is no government can regulate every aspect of people's lives. This is a government that has done so during the pandemic, generous support for people during the pandemic, and of course they're still supporting people now. And my personal view is that we over-regulate. You know, I want to see less state. I want to see lower taxation.
Even on water companies?
Well, that's yet to come. But the important thing for me, of course, is that the Conservative Party doesn't necessarily want to over-regulate, doesn't want to be too heavy on state, but it's doing so because it's the right thing to do right now.
But as Jim McMahon said, that may be the problem that we've had here with Thames Water and others. There should be more regulation of public utilities.
Well, I mean, ultimately, that figure you quoted earlier, 12, 14 billion pounds, is an eye-watering sum. And if that's replicated across the water companies, there's a big issue there. But this is more down to bad management and incompetence, in my view, not necessarily government support or otherwise.
And you certainly don't think it should be the taxpayer that's bailing them out?
Well, this is quite contentious, but ultimately the taxpayer should not be bailing out these companies. They're privately owned. I think the shareholders and the owners have a responsibility.
Absolutely. You know, when you look at how this company's amassed this debt, £14 billion, record leak levels, off what we're warning the government last year, that the financial resilience of some of these companies was not where it should be. You've got to say, well, why didn't they step in earlier? But we shouldn't be picking up the tab for this failure.
Yeah, but why is it that Labour is anxious not to get drawn into renationalisation debate? Because clearly that what will be happening in a short term. The company will be nationalised under government control until it's sorted out.
Well, that'll be nationalisation by default. If we want to renationalise companies, we would have to pay billions of pounds out to shareholders. And look, you know, there's an awful lot of challenges we face in this country, and I don't think we can honestly say hand on heart that the priority should be to pay out shareholders to buy companies back into public control.
So therefore, the onus will be on the regulator, off what, of course, called into number 11 this morning by Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah, you've got to ask some serious questions about what's been going on. It sounds to me as if the regulators have been warning the government, but no action has been taken. Right. I think there's more to come on.
Jeremy Hunt has said, actually, within the last hour, that there is going to be an announcement by the regulators about all their discussions this morning.
Yeah, well, nothing said when they left. Scores on the doors. How are you scoring them today?
Well, Rishi was good today. I would give it a 1-0 to Rishi.
Right, OK, in extra time.
How's that being fully partisan?
OK.
Justin?
Oh, 6-0 to Keir, obviously. Well, what else am I going to say?
But an own goal going on the housing rather than the mortgages and the cost of living, do you think?
No. I mean, we absolutely have to face up to the fact that we're not building enough houses that people can afford to live in. And you know, I'm comfortable with that being a big part of the next election, because that is what my constituents need, somewhere they can actually afford to live.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Enjoy your free glass of Thames Water here on the desk, courtesy of GB News. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up...
Stay with us, yes. Coming up in the next hour, you might have seen the pictures, a Just Stop Oil pitch invasion at the second test at Lord's.
It's just not cricket. if you pardon the expression. Also updating you on the latest in Ukraine, that missile that's hit the pizza restaurant. We'll be speaking to someone who was there just minutes before. Stay with us here on GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty warm and humid out there today. Some heavy rain in places. Many areas, though, staying dry. And it is going to be turning fresher and cooler by tomorrow, thanks to this cold front, which is introducing cooler conditions. Ahead of it, though, as I said, really quite warm and humid. And this weather front is also providing some heavy bursts of rain across Northern Ireland and southern Scotland in particular already. And that rain will slowly edge its way across much of Scotland into parts of Wales and northern England too. One or two heavy showers possible over northeast England and the Midlands later, but much of southern England, eastern England will be dry, and it should turn drier in Northern Ireland. Also turning fresher here as well, but certainly for many central and eastern parts, really warm, really humid. Temperatures could get to 25 Celsius. Could be some heavier downpours then this afternoon and evening over northeast England and southeast Scotland, perhaps before that rain tends to ebb away. But it is going to linger as it spreads its way into eastern parts of England, bringing some perhaps useful rain across East Anglia and the southeast. Staying warm and humid here. As things turn dry and clearer elsewhere, it will be a fresher, less humid night. A few showers coming into the northwest. We start with pretty cloudy skies then for East Anglia and the southeast tomorrow, with some outbreaks of rain. That'll only slowly pull away as we go through the day. Still a bit of uncertainty about when it will clear, but it should brighten up. Many places then seeing bright spells, but there will be a few showers during Thursday afternoon, particularly over northeast England and eastern Scotland. One or two heavy ones possible as well. But again, that fresher feel, it won't be as humid. Temperatures close to average, high teens to low 20s. Still a few heavy showers across the northeast during Thursday afternoon into the evening time, but many places becoming dry before more rain then starts to push in from the Atlantic during Friday. A much more changeable week this week. Rain at times, but many places seeing sunny spells this weekend with temperatures close to average.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Turning off the taps is Thames Water on the brink of being nationalised after its boss stood down, with the company facing £14 billion in debt. Reports all our water bills could be going up by 40%.
At PMQs, Sunak and Starmer clash over the government's house building record. Sir Keir Starmer claims Labour is now the party of home ownership, while Sunak blames Labour MPs for blocking new developments in their constituencies.
The latest on the desperate rescue efforts in the Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk to rescue survivors after 10 are killed in a Russian missile attack on a pizza restaurant. We'll be speaking to someone who was in there just minutes before the attack.
And row, row, row the boat. We are live from Henley, where the 184-year-old regatta is underway. GB News' Ellie Costello, who braved the wind in her hat at Royal Ascot, will be doing the same from the banks of the Thames. Before all that, here are your headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thanks very much and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 1:01. Sir Keir Starmer has questioned whether the Prime Minister will hit his target of building 300,000 new homes a year. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader accused Rishi Sunak of not agreeing with the Housing Minister on the pledge and instead spending thousands of pounds on adverts criticising the plans. Sir Keir also said house building has collapsed since Mr Sunak scrapped mandatory targets. But the Prime Minister says 2.2 million additional homes have been built since the Tories took power 13 years ago. He accused Labour ministers of being against more built housing in their own areas.
The Prime Minister says he's 100% on it, but his definition of 100% on it is to gently ask the banks to do the right thing. His softly approach, refusing to put mandatory measures in place, risks leaving 1 million households without support. How many will have to lose their homes before he'll stand up for the people his party have pushed into economic misery?
Mr. Speaker, in fact, the vast majority of the mortgage market is now covered by the new mortgage charter that the Chancellor's brought in. That is delivering practical help to mortgage holders, allowing them to extend their terms, switch to interest-only mortgage, and actually saving them hundreds of pounds a month. So instead of scaring them, actually, there is now practical support in place. But it's right that he raised home ownership, Mr. Speaker. That's why we, on this side of the House, introduced a 95% mortgage guarantee scheme. It's why we introduced the first homes.
The Chancellor has pressed consumer watchdogs over concerns that firms are exploiting high inflation to boost their profits. Jeremy Hunt met with the Competition and Markets Authority and the regulators for the energy, water and communications sectors to question them on what powers they can use to help lower prices for customers. The meeting comes after the Bank of England suggested some retailers are hiking prices or failing to pass on lower costs to consumers. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it'll look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT, which manages the 999 phone system, has apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. The company took nearly 3 hours to alert the government to the problem. Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up by the government, including possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. An urgent question was raised in the House of Commons by MP Jim McMahon.
Now, the news that we're seeing is a result of the Conservative Party's failed profit above public interest experiment, handing over the water industry at a knockdown price, together with the entire infrastructure serving the nation, over to private enterprise. Almost unique, for instance, when rail was privatised, the PRACs weren't sold off. But with water, the lot was handed over with little safeguards for our national interest, our national security or bill payers.
It is for the company and its investors to resolve any possible issues. And government, of course, is confident that Ofwat, as the economic regulator of the water industry, is working closely with any company that would be facing financial stress.
3 people have been arrested after Just Stop Oil protesters stopped the second Ashes Test match today by running onto the pitch. England wicketkeeper Johnny Bairstow took matters into his own hands by picking up one of the protesters attempting to throw paint on the field and carrying them off. The other protester was removed by security staff before being taken away from the grounds. Just Stop Oil say they disrupted the match between England and Australia to demand action from the government on climate change. But Ed Miliband, Shadow Secretary for Climate Change, says their tactics aren't working.
Labour condemns Just Stop Oil. I don't think their tactics do anything for anyone. Labour has taken a position which will cut bills, ensure jobs, create energy security and tackle the climate crisis.
Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey has concluded his first day in court to face trial over alleged sex offences against 4 men. The charges include sexual assault, indecent assault and causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent. The 63-year-old is appearing at Southern Crown Court for the 4-week trial, which will resume on Friday. He denies all accusations against him. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Mark and Pip.
You're watching at the live desk on GB News. There are major questions over the future of Thames Water this afternoon. There are widespread reports that it is on the point of being nationalised after the company chief executive was fired yesterday, allegedly fired.
Well, Thames Water says it's in constructive discussions, as it said, with shareholders. The government, though, was brought to the Commons, the dispatch box, to answer an urgent question earlier following PMQs.
Yes, at Prime Minister's questions, though, Sir Keir Starmer attacked the Prime Minister over house building, accusing Rishi Sunak of no longer believing in his own target. Well, joining us from Westminster is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Who do you think came out on top then, Tom?
Well, it was interesting actually listening to that exchange in the chamber not so long ago, because Keir Starmer really seemed like he had been a GB News viewer. Now, why do I say that? Well, let's take a listen to the opening question he had in his back and forth with Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, his party spent thousands of pounds on adverts attacking plans to build 300,000 new homes a year. At the same time, his housing minister says it's Tory party policy to build 300,000 new homes a year. So is he for building 300,000 new homes a year or against it?
Now, if that sounded a little bit familiar to GB News viewers or listeners, that's because this is precisely the question I asked of the Prime Minister last week.
The Conservative Party is putting out literature in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election, attacking the Liberal Democrats for a target of 300,000 homes a year. Is that no longer the government's target?
And in both occasions, the Prime Minister chose not to answer that question. I've spoken now to the government spokesperson as well, who says that the government is still committed to 300,000 homes a year as a target, but it is also incontrovertibly the case that the Conservative Party is putting out literature in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election, attacking a policy of 300,000 homes a year, and attacking that target, describing it as a Lib Dem target. It's the most extraordinary contortion of views, and no wonder the Prime Minister, on both occasions, last week to myself and this week to Sir Keir Starmer, refused to answer the question. It put him on the back foot for that entire exchange, and so this week I think it's fair to say that Keir Starmer came out top.
And then after PMQs, the taps were turned on, or was it turned off? I'm not quite sure. That urgent question then, we were perhaps expecting the Environment Secretary's coffee. She didn't turn up. It was the Water Minister, Rebecca Powell, that had to answer these questions concerning Thames Water. Real concerns that it could go under emergency nationalisation by the government.
Huge concerns, but not many answers. Rebecca Powell, in her answer to the urgent question, tried to sort of calm the waters, to search for an appropriate metaphor, in terms of saying that the water industry in the United Kingdom is financially stable, despite these reports that we've all been reading overnight. It really did seem that the United Kingdom government is still saying that all options are on the table, refusing to rule out any specific course of action. And that does lead to a huge amount of speculation in this area.
Yeah, and Jim McMahon asking the specific question, who will pay for any bailout, bearing in mind sovereign nation funds are involved in Thames Water, including from Abu Dhabi and China even?
Certainly, there are huge questions because of the amount of money that we're looking at. Up to £14 billion, one report suggests. And that is a vast, vast amount of money in the context of government spending. Now, how much might the government put into any sort of bailouts? Might there be another commercial deal found? Might something be facilitated by the government? Or might bills rise? These are all unanswered questions at this stage. And this, it leads to some real anxiety, not just in business, but also for people, families and homes across the country. We simply do not know where the water industry is going. We don't know specifically Thames Water, which is one of those largest water companies in the United Kingdom. And currently, while the government is trying to reassure everyone by saying all options are on the table, to some people that is not the most reassuring message because it lacks that sense of certainty.
Tom, for the moment in Westminster, thank you very much indeed for updating us on that urgent question which followed PMQs. Thank you.
Now, the Welsh Government has announced it is clamping down on junk food meal deals and temporary price reductions for unhealthy foods to help tackle the country's obesity problem.
Well, the Labour-led government or administration in Wales arguing it's necessary, given almost 2/3 of people in Wales are now either overweight or obese.
So, is this a necessary evil or an overreach of the so-called nanny state? Well, to answer that question, let's speak to the Secretary of State for Wales, David T.C. Davis. Good to see you this afternoon. There's an obesity crisis. What is wrong with the Welsh Government taking this action to try and help people's health?
Well, the answer to an obesity crisis is actually to give people more education about what food is healthy and what isn't and what you can cook. It's not to simply say that we're going to stop supermarkets from discounting food or giving people a meal deal. I mean, lots of us take advantage of meal deals. I do. I use one in Tesco's all the time outside of Westminster, £3.49 with my club card, and I can have a sandwich.
Well, they say they're not doing away with them completely, are they? They're going to change
you'll be able
what
to
they're
have
made up
an
of.
apple or something like that instead of a packet of crisps. And there's no certainty, actually, you'll be able to have a sandwich or even the pasta dishes because they're talking about how much salt and sugar, and so it all depends on the details. But basically, the traditional meal deal, as we all know it, is a sandwich, a packet of crisps or a chocolate bar and a drink, a coffee. Sometimes some do coffees. I know which supermarkets do and don't. I'm an expert on meal
But
deals.
just because it's tradition, David, doesn't mean it shouldn't change, does it?
Hang on a minute. Why shouldn't people be able to choose what they have in their meal deal? I mean, a lot.
Because if there's an obesity crisis, then that's going to put pressure on the health service. So it's got all these wider ramifications.
No, I mean, well, first of all, they're only talking about doing this in supermarkets. So, for example, McDonald's will still be able to offer a meal deal themselves, which is fine, by the way. I like McDonald's as well, and nothing wrong in that. But it's actually going to funnel people away from the supermarket into McDonald's and other places. I'll tell you one place it isn't going to impact on. It's the Senedd, where they're offering a full cooked breakfast with sausage, beans, bacon and hot buttered toast for £3.90, so about the same standard price as a meal deal. They're not going to be affected because it's not going to impact on restaurants and things. So, you know, there's a lot of hypocrisy about this. Let people choose. That's what I say. Give people the education, but let them choose. Because if the Welsh Labour government, they are going to go ahead and do this, they're going to almost double the price of those of having, say,
well,
protein
it'll
shakes.
still be the Senedd having to vote on it. They're not going to impose this. It will be a vote in the Senedd, even they might be eating their full fat breakfast at the time.
Frankly,
but look, let me put the figures to you when you talk about, you know, not actually addressing the situation directly. 60% of adults in Wales are above a healthy weight or overweight. A quarter of children starting school by the time they get to school where they are classed as obese, a 40% increase in those suffering type 2 diabetes. There is clearly, as Gemma Roberts from Obesity Alliance Cymru says, an obesity crisis in Wales.
Well, one of the answers to that, of course, is more exercise. I mean, I train every day. I'm absolutely.
But people haven't got time to do that, have they?
People, yeah, you can.
They're trying to work more hours during this cost of living crisis.
Well, the cost of living crisis is going to be made worse by almost doubling the price of having a couple of, a snack at lunchtime. Basically, most meal deals are pretty all right, I think. Packet of crisps.
Well, are they? Because you will know that there are many reports suggesting that sugary carbonated drinks, for instance, lead directly to an increase in diabetes.
I tell you what, let's put the information out there and let people decide. I mean, we're adults, right? Surely we can decide for ourselves what's healthy and what isn't. Who are the Welsh Labour government to turn around and say, you can't have a packet of crisps with your sandwich or a chocolate bar or a can of Coke? I mean, you know, we're not talking about heroin or cocaine here. We're talking about allowing adults to make an informed decision for themselves as to what they can and cannot eat. And it really rankles when the same Senedd members who are passing this legislation are able to tuck into bacon, egg and toast, hot buttered toast.
Well, at the moment, I mean, might you put a motion forward to actually address what's being delivered in the Senedd restaurant? I don't know.
I don't know.
But maybe that's your way to...
I'm actually pleasantly surprised. It's not some sort of vegan-orientated menu in the Welsh Senedd. I mean, that is good news. It's great for Welsh farmers that pork, bacon and beans are being offered in there. So I don't want to have a go at that. I just want everyone else in Wales to have the same right to make an informed decision about what they eat.
But you will know there are supermarkets elsewhere in England particularly who have actually agreed to take chocolate and things away from the checkout, where children obviously badger mum and dad as the trolley's waiting to go through the checkout.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the difference, isn't it? Because adults should be able to make an informed choice as to what they are and are not going to eat. But we all know, I mean, many of us, I've got kids, I'm sure many of us have got kids, we all know that there is sort of pest to power when you're queuing up at the till there. So I can understand that. But that is not That's not banning things. That's just making life a bit easier for hard-pressed parents. But if the parents still want to go and buy a bar of chocolate for their child, they can. And
we should just add, we don't know specifically yet what's the suggestion as to what will be banned. I mean, we know that there's obviously this plan to come into place, I think, by 2025.
But we know that it's going to be meal deals, as we know. The traditional
Products
meal
high
deal,
in
as
fat,
we know it,
sugar and salt.
By their definition. And what I would say is, if they're serious about getting more exercise, let's have a look at some of the health and safety regulations in school that stops kids from running around and playing bulldog and things like that, because or having snowball fights, because anecdotally I've been told that's a problem in some schools. Let people do exercise, but don't tell adults what they can or cannot eat. It's not the role of government to start doing that.
OK, where are your Welsh cakes?
Well, I get a lot of Welsh cakes in this job, actually. But you know what?
Should they be... Well, yeah.
Don't ban Welsh
having
cakes.
eaten 2 in the newsroom this morning...
Don't let Welsh Government take the biscuit.
Right. Another issue that has been exercising people in Llanelli, particularly, the Straddy Park Hotel near the old rugby ground, of course. Now another, as we understand, plans in place for it to be used for asylum seekers. A lot of local reaction, inevitably.
Of course, and I fully understand that, because when it comes down to it, people are concerned when large numbers of, frankly, mostly male asylum seekers are relocated somewhere. We've got to deal with the problem at source here. We've got 50,000 people a year or so landing illegally in this country in small boats. And so when I see Labour councillors or Labour MPs saying we don't want them here, I think, hang on a minute. You have voted against every single bit of legislation the Conservative government has brought in to try and tackle this. You've tried to stop us from sending people to safe third countries like Rwanda to have claims applied. You voted against legislation that will mean that anyone who arrives here illegally is not going to be able to claim permanent residency in the UK. You voted against all of this, and the Welsh Labour government are offering a salary of up to £20,000 a year in some local authority areas for some asylum seekers, even if they don't do any work, a universal basic income, which is going to make Wales even more of a magnet. And then you have the audacity to complain about the fact that some of those people are inevitably going to end up there.
But you mentioned the backlog. The reason there's a backlog is because your government hasn't dealt with it.
Because we've got vast numbers of people coming here illegally, and we do need to deal with it. It needs to be a
some would say irregular means, not illegally.
Well, whatever it is, people should not be arriving here in boats, and we need to tackle it. So if all those people who are complaining about Straddy Park, those Labour politicians, are serious, right, I hope that they'll support Rishi Sunak and this Conservative government in trying to tackle this problem at source, and I hope they'll oppose Welsh Labour's plans to offer universal basic income to some asylum seekers.
Right, well, just talking of income, there is a specific problem we understand with Straddy, and that is that a lot of staff at the hotel are facing redundancy, being laid off as a result.
And they were told, I mean, what sounds appalling to me is they were told via email. To be told via email, you're losing your job.
That, as you say, sounds quite appalling. I don't know the details, but obviously somebody's going to be working there if there are going to be several hundred asylum seekers there. But I get the wider point is, you know, people actually don't want large numbers of young male asylum seekers turning up in their communities. I understand that. So let's stop the problem at source. Let's all get together. Let's get some of these Labour politicians to join with us and back Rishi's legislation to stop this from happening.
And just to reflect on what we've been hearing at PMQs, going on the attack over housing, the mortgage problem, for the Tories, the problems are mounting, aren't they? They're piling up.
Well, we certainly need to be building more houses. Again, I've got 3 teenage children. I understand that. Every time somebody puts in a housing application, to build houses in my constituency, everyone else complains about it, but says we do want them, but we just don't want them here. If you actually look at the figures, though, Keir Starmer was on a sticky wicket with this one, because once again, we've had a Welsh Labour government completely in charge of planning and housing in Wales. For the last year that figures are available, which I think ended financial year 2022, about 5,000 new houses were built in Wales, as opposed to 170 in England. So there are 20 times the population in England, and we're building 32 times the number of houses. So once again, the record of the Conservative government, which could be better, I agree, and we do need to work to get more houses built, but it's still a lot better than the record of the Welsh Labour government is.
Has your Prime Minister given up?
Of course he hasn't given up. He's full of energy. Our Prime Minister is doing a fantastic job. He's out there delivering on our promises, getting inflation down. We're working on stopping the small boats. The economy is growing, and the GDP of England is now higher than it was pre-pandemic, whereas it's lower in Wales. And in England, of course, we're getting rid of waiting lists. There's no people waiting up
But
more
when
than
you
2
say
years.
the economy's
In Wales, over
growing, what people
30,000.
are seeing are interest rates of 5% and inflation of 8.7%.
Well, we've got to target inflation. Everyone agrees that inflation is a problem. And it's back to the reason I'm here to talk about meal deals, why it's pretty ridiculous for the Welsh Labour government to make food even more expensive. But you're right, of course we acknowledge there's a problem here. That's why the first priority of the UK government is to halve inflation.
Yeah, and can I ask the same question, that if those targets aren't achieved, what happens at the ballot box?
Well, I never predict what happens at the ballot box, but we all know that we have to show that we're working hard and achieving things. Of course we do, and that's why we're out every day doing just that.
Well, thank you for joining us here at GBNews. Thank you very much for your time. Coming up, a Hollywood star and his latest appearance. It's in court. Yes, Kevin Spacey and those charges of sexual assault. We'll have all the latest from outside court. Stay with us.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the live desk here on GB News. Now, Hollywood actor Kevin Spacey in court for the start of what could be a 4-week trial. He's been charged with sexual offences concerning 4 men.
The 12 charges include sexual and indecent assault alleged to have taken place between 2001 and 2013. Kevin Spacey denies all the charges.
The Home and Security editor Mark White joins us now from Southwark Crown Court to bring us up to date on what's been happening. And we saw there, Mark, him arriving with obviously a lot of people anxious to see this Hollywood actor.
Yeah, and he has now actually left the court. The court is finished for the day, looking very relaxed as he came out, saying hello and waving to a few people as he left the court to get a taxi. And he won't be back here until Friday when the trial gets underway proper. What we had today in a couple of hours really in the morning was the selection of those jury members and then the jury members being in panel being sworn in. So there are 9 males and 3 females on that jury, that initial 12. There are 2 reserve jurors there as well for the opening stages of this trial, always kept there just in case with a 4-week trial there is a particular issue that might occur to one of these jury members and they're not able to continue with their service. But as you said in the introduction there, Kevin Spacey is facing a total of 12 charges relating to 4 men. Those charges took place between 2001 and 2013. Much of the alleged offending taking place during the time that Kevin Spacey was the artistic director at the Old Vic Theatre in central London. Of course, he now lives in Hollywood, but we're told that he still has accommodation here in central London as well. The charges that he will face relate to counts of sexual assault and indecent assault, and a more serious charge that could bring with it a lengthy jail term if he is convicted. Say the trial itself is due to last some 4 weeks, and we expect the opening to begin on Friday.
And certainly he denied all those charges at a previous hearing, I think, Mark, back in January. But I see that Patrick Gibbs, his lawyer, Patrick Gibbs KC, saying that he'd returned to the UK to establish his innocence and proceed with his life.
Yes, his lawyer saying that he strenuously denies the charges against him. Indeed, in November of last year, when those charges were formulated, Kevin Spacey agreed to return to the UK to fight those charges. Of course, being in America, it might have been more difficult if he was not cooperative in terms of returning, but his lawyer said that he was happy to return because he wanted to clear his name, and that is part and parcel of the process, in conjunction, of course, with the prosecution claims that he is that he perpetrated some 12 offences against 4 individuals. All of that evidence will be gone into in a great deal of detail. They were briefly outlined to those jury members ahead of the start of this trial, but the judge said in much more detail they will hear exactly what those charges entailed and are likely, of course, during the course of the trial to hear perhaps from the victims, the alleged victims in this case.
Indeed. Mark, at Southwark Crown Court, thanks very much indeed for updating us.
Still to come here on GB News, the latest on the missile strike on a pizza restaurant in Ukraine, where twin girls have died. We will be speaking to a journalist who was at the restaurant minutes beforehand. First, your headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thank you. Here are the headlines at 1:30, and we can just start with some breaking news. A 67-year-old man has pleaded guilty to the murders of a father and son in Cambridgeshire. 57-year-old Gary Dunmore and 32-year-old Joshua Dunmore were shot dead in 2 villages 6 miles apart back in March. Stephen Alderton was remanded in custody and will be sentenced in October. That news just in. Sir Keir Starmer has questioned whether the Prime Minister will hit his target of building 300,000 new homes a year. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader accused Rishi Sunak of not agreeing with the Housing Minister on the pledge and instead spending thousands of pounds on adverts criticising the plans. Sir Keir also said house building has collapsed since Mr Sunak scrapped mandatory targets. But the Prime Minister says 2.2 million additional homes have been built since the Tories took power 13 years ago. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it'll look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT, which manages the 999 phone system, has apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. The company took nearly 3 hours to alert the government to the problem. Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up by the government, including possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. An urgent question was raised in the House of Commons by Jim McMahon earlier on. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2652 and €1.1574. The price of gold is £1,507 and 86 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,511 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to the live desk here on GB News. Now, let's catch up with what the Prince of Wales has been up to, spending the last 2 days, of course, launching this new project to show that homelessness can be ended.
Yeah, it's a cause so close to his heart, particularly because of the support his late mother gave to homeless people. Well, in Sheffield yesterday, the future king spent time playing basketball with Aston Villa footballer Tyrone Mings, showing how grassroots sport could help young people at risk of homelessness.
Well, royal correspondent Cameron Walker has more. He was there for us.
Being listened to, being spoken to, and just having somewhere to go.
The dream of an estimated 300,000 people across the UK, but the reality is tonight, those human beings will go to sleep without anywhere to call home. I met Colleen on a busy shopping street in Sheffield. Burying 2 of her own children was followed by poor mental health and homelessness. She's been on the streets for 4 years.
You get cups of water thrown all over you. You get people laughing at you. You get people saying, get a job. You get people just... It's not easy. It's not nice.
The Prince of Wales spent the last 2 days touring the UK, unveiling 6 locations he hopes will form blueprints on how to end homelessness. The 5-year project, funded by the Royal Foundation, will focus on how to make the issue rare, brief and unrepeated. He was joined by Aston Villa player and Homewards advocate Tyrone Mings at Reach Up Youth in Sheffield yesterday to play a match with some locals. The Prince was highlighting how grassroots sports could help young people at risk of homelessness. 22-year-old Gabriel had housing issues when he was younger, but those who'd experienced similar problems helped him apply for jobs and university. He thinks Prince William has a good chance to make a real difference.
Sometimes a lot of people overlook the issues, such issues, and having someone of his profile, his influence, speaking about it makes others realise how alarming the issue is.
Critics of the monarchy have branded the future king hypocritical, pointing out his multiple homes and duchy land spanning more than 100,000 acres. Some have even accused him of straying too far into politics. Royal aides insist, however, that the Homewards project is simply additive to what charities and local organisations are already doing. It's thought Prince William is aware of his privilege and is using his platform to launch a project he hopes will have tangible impact. But will it help people like Colleen?
If he's going to come and help people that's homeless and overlook what other people don't want to do, you know what I mean, then that's going to be great. That's going to be smashing. And I can't wait to see what's going to come out of the situation. Is it going to be bogus or is it going to be good? Because he can still come over and throw his face, but what's going to come out of it?
The whistle-stop tour of the UK is just the beginning of a long journey. It'll be half a decade before we find out if Prince William truly has shown that homelessness can be ended. Cameron Walker, GB News, Sheffield.
And we'll keep you updated, of course, on how that project develops. Now, Thames Water saying it's working constructively with shareholders to try and deal with its £14 billion debt pile. But ministers, we understand, drawing up contingencies to cover any potential collapse of the company.
Yeah, it does sound dire at the moment. The government is said to be considering an emergency nationalisation of Britain's biggest water company amid concerns over its financial stability. The so-called special administration regime includes bringing it back into public hands.
Now, in the past few minutes, actually, former Liberal Democrat Cabinet Minister Sir Vince Cable said nationalisation is an option. I don't think one should be dogmatic about it, he said. There may be neater and cheaper ways of dealing with it, but we've heard of collapsing rail franchises. This may be a last resort the government have to do to keep the water flowing. Well, Thames Water Chief Executive Sarah Bentley stepping down from the role yesterday after warning the rising costs making it harder to tackle all the problems.
Yeah, well, let's get more on what this means for us from our economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. So, Liam, is the water going to keep flowing for Thames Water customers?
I think the water will keep flowing, but it's clear that Thames Water hasn't got money to hand to do lots of the repairs it needs to do with leaking sewage and so on, and upgrading what's essentially Victorian infrastructure. Let's just think back to where Thames Water came from. I've put some bits of information here in a graphic for you. Thames Water was privatised all the way back in 1989. And it's huge. It covers lots of London and the South East, across to Gloucestershire, all the way to Kent in the east. Almost, more than 1 in 4 UK households are serviced by Thames Water. It covers 27% of the population. It's absolutely huge. We don't often talk about it, but it's partly owned, as we can see in the next graphic, by the Chinese government and the government of United Arab Emirates. That's Abu Dhabi in the next graphic. And, of course, it's got a £14 billion debt pile. And this is a lot of the problem, Mark and Pip. Interest rates are going up. That means everyone who's got debt is having to pay more on that debt.
Including public utilities.
Including public utilities. It's not just a mortgage problem. This is happening across the corporate world, not just in the UK, but across the whole global economy. And as those debt service costs go up, I mean, Thames Water, they're kind of spinning, it's because we want to be nice to the environment, and it's because we want to meet our climate change obligations and all the rest of it. But be in no doubt, they've got a massive debt pile. They're now screaming at their shareholders, give us more money, so we can service the debt. And that's the danger, that the debt could on the corporate markets, the price of the debt is now dropping like a stone, and that's why I wouldn't say bankruptcy, because the government can stand behind it, but certainly insolvency, a cash crunch,
the government
is
is being asked,
a real probability.
How much, could this bailout cost? Could it affect people's pension funds as well? There's huge ramifications here.
Well, it's certainly in the realms of a lot of money when your debt stock is £14 billion. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but just so people know what £14 billion is, that's between 2 and 3%, 2 or 3p in the pound on the basic rate of income tax. It's a huge amount of money, but I'm not sure it's going to come to that. I do think the shareholders will come up with more money. They can restructure the debt. Obviously, they've got the British government standing behind them. But be in no doubt, what does this mean for us? Well, it's not going to help our bills to go down, and it's probably going to help our bills to go up. And some industry analysts are talking about an increase in the average annual household bill for water from something like 450 quid over the next couple of years to 650 quid.
But just
a big change.
Just to touch on what Sir Vince Cable was talking about, this sort of spectre of nationalisation, it would be an emergency measure, it would be a temporary thing. But where does that leave the debt? Does it leave us, the taxpayer, more exposed to having to bail the company out?
Well, that then depends. It depends on really complex things like, bear with me, the covenants on the debt.
Exactly.
It depends on the technical obligations in the contract when the money was lent. Certainly, a lot of the financial markets think that if it's nationalised, some of the debt that was extended to it as a private company might not be worth... It might not, as we say in finance, be made whole. You might not get all your debt back. You might get, a certain number of pence. I'm speculating, a certain number of pence in the pound. That's why the price of the debt has plunged, and what we call the yield on the debt, the amount of money investors want to carry on lending, has gone up.
And why Jim McMahon, obviously the shadow environment minister, wanted some answers to the dispatch box earlier, that urgent question.
Because the markets are looking. Look, I don't think it's going to affect anyone's water supply. Let's be completely clear. I don't think it's going to mean any immediate increase in your water bill. So we should just park that. But I do think it demonstrates that all bets are off at the moment as interest rates rise. If a Conservative government, a Prime Minister that said he grew up with Margaret Thatcher as a heroine has to reverse one of the kind of Thatcher-era privatisations, we are in ideologically... turbulent waters. And it also means that as we go forward, this debt and the interest payments on it are going to sit on the balance sheet of Thames Water. And in the end, the 27 million of us who are serviced by Thames Water are going to have to pay for that.
And questions are also being asked about the financial situation of other water companies as well.
This is what happens when interest rates go up. People like me talk about, interest rates go up, well, whatever, maybe ask me about their mortgage. It affects the whole economy. Nothing is more important when it comes to money than the cost of servicing your debt, as the British government is finding, as many homeowners are finding, as many of us with credit card bills and other personal loans are finding, and as corporate Britain is finding. And that includes our public utilities.
And other companies who may be quite leveraged. Liam, thank you for taking us through all that. And, of course, we'll see what emerges this afternoon. We're being told by the Minister, of course, who is at the dispatch box, water sector is financially resilient, but working closely with a company or any company facing financial stress. We'll update you as we get more.
A GB News investigation has found that a London charity that received more than £250,000 of taxpayers' money last year has published discriminatory and extremist content on social media.
Well, this is Access UK, whose aim is to improve opportunities, they say, for ethnic minorities. But it's also hosted people on a panel of events. Charlie Peters has been investigating for us.
White people are a plague. That's a suggestion made in a video posted on social media by a London charity. Take a look.
You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed.
Access UK is supposed to help ethnic minorities get into education or employment. They were given £266,000 in government and lottery grants, according to their most recent accounts.
But when will I see you again?
But posts on their social media profiles include footage mocking conservative politicians and repeated claims that ancient Egypt was black, a conspiracy theory associated with the Hotep movement. A video posted on their YouTube channel shows their managing director, Nana Agyeman, taking part in a debate with various controversial figures. They include Raspect, a rapper and conspiracy theorist who founded a paramilitary-style group called the Forever Family Force. They've also hosted Dr. Umar Johnson, a discredited American psychologist who has opposed interracial marriage and claims that he can cure homosexuality. The Access UK website also hosts a cartoon that says black people have no power because they give money to white business people. Some MPs are now calling for the government to review grants to charities.
Well, it's very concerning to hear those reports, and of course when we're giving taxpayers money out we want to make sure it's spent correctly, but we also want to be giving it to organisations that bring the community together and actually have a positive impact on society. Going from the things I've heard, I have serious doubts as to whether that's the case here. There are numerous examples where this is going on, and government doesn't want to be giving money to these kind of groups if we know that something is seriously wrong there. So I'd urge us to look a little bit further into it, see if there's anybody else that shouldn't be receiving this kind of taxpayers' money, and ultimately doing something about it.
Despite claiming to be run by volunteers, Access UK claims to have spent over £182,000 on volunteer allowances. Managing Director Nana Agyeman also appears to be a trustee of the charity, under the name Nana Yor Agyeman, potentially breaching charity rules on conflicts of interest. Mr. Agyeman is also a director of the campaigning group Black Child Agenda, which was recently exposed by The Times as having published misleading adverts which encouraged people to apply for the Windrush compensation scheme, despite not being eligible. A Charity Commission spokesperson said, "We are currently assessing information following concerns raised with us regarding trustee payments at Access UK. This will determine our next steps." Regarding the Plague Instagram post, Access UK Director Nana Agyeman said, "We do not condone or tolerate any form of racism or discrimination within our organisation, and that Access UK serves a cross-section of beneficiaries from diverse backgrounds." Agyeman did not respond to our other questions. Charlie Peters, GB News, Tottenham.
Just to bring you a bit of an update on that latest stunt that Just Stop Oil protesters carried out at the second test, the Ashes at Lords. You might have seen pictures, hopefully we can show you, Johnny Bairstow carrying off a Just Stop Oil protester from the pitch at Lords just after play had started. Hopefully we can show you that picture. Well, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has sort of waded into this drama, if you like, and he's actually praised Johnny Bairstow for his actions. And he says that these sorts of selfish guerrilla tactics that target events bringing joy to millions are exactly why the government brought in new powers so the police can take swift action. The Prime Minister is pleased that play was able to resume quickly. There's Johnny Bairstow carrying off the protester shortly after play began. Play was disrupted for quite a few minutes earlier, and the Prime Minister has thanked security staff and Johnny Bairstow's swift hands, Mark.
And in terms of political balance, let's reflect. Sir Keir Starmer said he was disappointed in the actions of Just Stop Oil. A Labour Party spokesman saying the tactics were counterproductive, dangerous and wrong. This sort of activity is not appropriate or justifiable in any way, said a Labour spokesman. I think, paraphrasing, it's just not cricket.
Absolutely.
3
And
people arrested, we should say.
Yes, and we should just add, because it's vaguely important if you're into cricket, England are yet to bat. Australia are on 79 for 1.
Ooh, right, OK. Now, let's pop on a pinstripe blazer, pour a Pims. Yes, it's time for the 184th Henley Royal Regatta, the annual rowing event on the Thames taking place, of course, this week.
Yeah, our GB News national reporter Ellie Costello is at the prestigious event in Henley-on-Thames. Ellie, last time we saw you at Ascot, you had this beautiful headwear on. I thought you'd be doing something similar today.
Yeah, where's your boater?
I know, I've let you all down. But look, I'm fitting to the dress code. I'm in my long dress, I'm in wedges, and I've got a blazer on. Not a particularly funky one, it must be said, compared to some of the people around here. Let's go on a hunt, shall we, for a funky blazer. Got one over here, yellow, purple, and black there. Got some wonderful stripes. The pinstripe blazers, I must say, is a highlight at Henley. That's what it's known for, alongside, of course, the world-class rowing. And you can see Pip talking about fabulous hats. There's a lady in yellow here in a wonderful cream hat there. You do see fascinators and kind of boater hats. Straw-style hats are more frequently seen at Henley than those massive, big, dramatic ones that I was wearing at Ascot last week. But it must be said, I am missing that large, dramatic hat. You can see here, we're down at the boatyard on Henley. This is right here on the Thames. This is a London-based team. I actually can't see the name of them, but that's the men's team that are just taken off there. They've just launched, as they say in the business. They are heading towards the start line. They are in the next race, so best of luck to them. They are a London-based team, but there are teams coming from all over the world. This is the most prestigious regatta in the world. Teams from New Zealand, from Australia, from the United States. And I know you're just talking about the cricket, you're just talking about the Ashes at Lord's and that Just Stop Oil protester. Well, get this for a story. There was a Melbourne University team this morning. They flew here from Melbourne, of course, in Australia, all the way to Henley-on-Thames, and they were disqualified 200 metres into their race as they went a bit skew-whiff, and the judges didn't like that very much. But it is quite windy here on Henley today, so we did feel quite sorry for them, and the team are really, really disappointed. They made it all the way through qualifying. They flew here from Melbourne, and then they lost out not even 200 metres into the race. So really, really disappointed for them. But it's absolutely wonderful, just the amount of wonderful outfits that are here. People are having a fantastic time sitting and standing along the Thames, capturing a glimpse of first-class, world-class rowing, and of course, spectacular fashion as well, which is
that gentleman who just walked past you, it looks like the school uniform I used to have to wear. I used to have to wear a stripy blazer,
this
just
gentleman
like that,
in
and a boater.
Cakes.
It's horrific.
But it's interesting, Elliot, as you point out, I mean, this is obviously on the social calendar as Ascot, but, you know, we've got some serious sportsmen, Olympic-class rowers and oarsmen involved.
Yes, exactly. This is a jewel in the social calendar, the English social calendar. Many people look forward to Henley. People come from all over the world to be here and to be seen here. I was talking to people in the know a little bit earlier on, actually. I can hear many American accents here. And apparently, the Americans love coming to Henley and love to be seen at Henley because it is so quintessentially British. And they even have blazers tailor-made for them for this very event. So it is world famous, and everybody wants to be here and also to soak up the very Britishness of the event. I mean, in the next hour when you and I speak, we are hoping to actually be on a boat, and I can show you, but just beyond this tent here, there are many people just sitting there, having their cake, having their champagne, just soaking up the atmosphere. And as you say, Mark, it's not just about the sport, and it is world-class sport and some of the best rowing. Oh, must be said as well, Oxford Brookes, for the Brits, we are absolutely smashing it. We've won every single race so far, 3 races with Oxford Brookes University so far, won all of them, so that's fantastic. But I will show you the atmosphere down the river a little bit later on, because people are just having the most wonderful time.
Well, Ellie, before we come back to you, I expect you to be having cake, champagne, Any other nice little bits of fish you can get your hands on? And put a boater on as well for next
I'll see
time.
what I can do. Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'm sure I'll be able to find something.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll stay with the water theme, but this time, are the financial taps being turned off for Thames Water? And could all of us be facing a 40% increase in our bills? All the latest coming up. Stay with us.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Turning off the financial taps is Thames Water on the brink of being nationalised after its boss stood down, with the company facing £14 billion in debts, and reports all our bills could be going up by 40%.
The latest on the desperate rescue efforts in the Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk to rescue survivors after 10 people, including twin sisters, are killed in a Russian missile attack on a pizza restaurant. It's been announced that those sisters were amongst those confirmed dead in the tragic attack.
And heading for the pavilion, Johnny Bairstow, latest catch, England's wicket-keeper removing a Just Stop Oil protester during the second Ashes test at Lord's. And the Prime Minister says it's just not cricket.
And row, row, row the boat. Who wrote this? We're live at Henley, where the 184-year-old regatta is underway. GB News' Ellie Costello is promising she'll join us live from the River Thames itself. Let's hope she doesn't fall in. First are your headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom at 2:01. Sir Keir Starmer has questioned whether the Prime Minister will hit his target of building 300,000 new homes a year. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader accused Rishi Sunak of not agreeing with the Housing Minister on the pledge and instead spending thousands of pounds on adverts criticising the plans. Sir Keir also said house building has collapsed since Mr Sunak scrapped mandatory targets. But the Prime Minister says 2.2 million additional homes have been built since the Tories took power from Labour 13 years ago.
The Prime Minister says he's 100% on it. But his definition of 100% on it is to gently ask the banks to do the right thing. His softly approach, refusing to put mandatory measures in place, risks leaving 1 million households without support. How many will have to lose their homes before he'll stand up for the people his party have pushed into economic misery?
Mr Speaker, in fact, the vast majority of the mortgage market is now covered by the new mortgage charter that the Chancellor's brought in. That is delivering practical help to mortgage holders, allowing them to extend their terms, switch to interest-only mortgage, and actually saving them hundreds of pounds a month. So instead of scaring them, actually, there is now practical support in place. But it's right that he raised home ownership, Mr Speaker. That's why we, on this side of the House, introduced a 95% mortgage guarantee scheme. It's why we introduced the first homes.
The Chancellor has pressed consumer watchdogs over concerns that firms are exploiting high inflation to boost their profits. Jeremy Hunt met with the Competition and Markets Authority and the regulators for the energy, water and communications sectors to question them on what powers they can use to help lower prices for customers. The meeting comes after the Bank of England suggested some retailers are hiking prices or failing to pass on lower costs to consumers. Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up by the government, including possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. An urgent question was raised in the House of Commons by Labour MP Jim McMahon.
Now, the news that we're seeing is a result of the Conservative Party's failed profit above public interest experiment, handing over the water industry at a knockdown price, together with the entire infrastructure serving the nation, over to private enterprise. Almost unique, for instance, when rail was privatised, the PRACs weren't sold off. But with water, the lot was handed over with little safeguards for our national interest, our national security or bill payers.
It is for the company and its investors to resolve any possible issues. And government, of course, is confident that Ofwat, as the economic regulator of the water industry, is working closely with any company that would be facing financial stress.
Downing Street has described the groping allegation against the Conservative candidate for London Mayor Daniel Korski as very serious. Number 10 also indicated that Rishi Sunak would urge any further complainants to come forward. It's after TV producer Daisy Goodwin made a formal complaint accusing the former Downing Street aide of groping her a decade ago. Mr Korski denies the allegation, saying it's categorically untrue. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it'll look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT, which manages the 999 phone system, has apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. The company took nearly 3 hours to alert the government to the problem. 3 people have been arrested after Just Stop Oil protesters stopped the second Ashes Test match today by running onto the pitch. England wicketkeeper Johnny Bairstow took matters into his own hands by picking up a protester attempting to throw paint on the field and carrying them off. Another protester was removed from the grounds by security staff. Just Stop Oil says they disrupted the match to demand action from the government on climate change. A jury has been selected ahead of the trial of Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey for alleged sex offences against 4 men. The charges include sexual assault, indecent assault and causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent. The 63-year-old will appear at Southwark Crown Court for a 4-week trial. He denies all 12 charges. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Mark and Pip.
Tamsin, thanks very much and welcome back to the live desk here on GB News. Now, Labour has been pressing the government on how much a taxpayer-funded bailout of Thames Water could cost as Britain's biggest water company finds itself, well, literally swimming in debt.
Watchdog Ofwat are in discussions with Thames Water on the need for a robust and credible plan. While Environment Minister Rebecca Powers said there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes to make sure that customers will not be impacted.
Let's get more with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who can join us from Downing Street. And Darren, this emergency nationalisation of the company even being openly talked about as one option.
Yeah, indeed, and the government potentially are going to have to do a hell of a lot to rescue Thames Water. It serves some 15 million customers here in London and indeed around the southeast of England. It is by far Britain's largest water supplier. It cannot afford to fail. It's too big to fail, if you like, in many degrees, Mark, but it is in a hell of a lot of trouble. £14 billion worth of debt. Yes, 14 billion. Now, the company suggests that its cash flows are still pretty good. In a statement today, it says it continues to maintain a strong liquidity position, including 4.4 billion of cash and committed funding. But the problem is, it is straining under that amount of debt. Its chief executive quit yesterday. And, as we heard from the opposition and others, there is a feeling that the government may well need to step in. We've also heard from the business secretary, Kevin Badenoch, in the last hour or so. She talked about how concerned she was about the situation, but also that the government may be prepared to act.
I'm very concerned. Obviously, this is a commercially sensitive situation, and I know that my colleagues across government are looking at what we can do. I don't know too much about what the plans are going to be. I was concerned to hear that the CEO had resigned abruptly, but we need to make sure that Thames Water as an entity survives. There's a lot of work that the government is trying to do on resolving sewage. At the moment, certainly up until now, the regulator has been focused on keeping consumer bills down. But there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to take place, and we need that entity to survive and continue going.
Now, one option for the government would be to place Thames Water in what is called a special administration regime. Mark, that would see effectively the company temporarily taken over by the government. Happened to the energy company Bulb at the end of last year, you may well remember. Now, the government would view that very much only as a temporary measure, but in the end it could involve a hell of a lot of taxpayers' money if the current regime, the current administration of Thames Water cannot clear some of that debt. And that raises big questions about water privatisation. We know the opposition, Labour, have been pretty critical of how the water companies have operated, not least of all because companies have not invested really an awful lot in terms of new reservoirs, in terms of leaky pipes over the last couple of decades or so. They have mounted up an incredible amount of debt, 60 billion across the board, many suggesting privatisation in its current form is not working. But clearly there is immediate concern about Thames Water. As I say, it is too big to fail. I think people don't need to worry about the water running out in London and the southeast of England, but what it might mean is huge government intervention.
And Darren, Thames Water, we've heard a lot about this morning, but there is a concern that water companies generally could be putting up people's bills, customers' bills, by up to 40%.
Yeah, indeed, and water companies would claim that they need this money to invest into things like repairing pipes. I think Thames Water loses the equivalent of 250 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day in water leakages. Clearly, there's a strain on the water system, particularly when the weather's been as dry as it has been recently. There needs to be more reservoirs built so that there is more water available, particularly during the summer. Water companies argue that costs money, and costs are rising across the board, aren't they? But you're right, water bills are going up. I think the average water bill now in England and Wales is at 448 quid a year, though that is likely to increase quite substantially over the next year or so, at a time when consumers can least afford it. There are certain parts of the United Kingdom, like Northern Ireland, where people do not pay water bills. It is kept by everyone in terms of the money is spent by the government. So all in all, this is a pretty complicated thing. But in the end, there will be questions about the privatisation regime, not least of all because while the companies argue they haven't got the money they need to invest in trying to fix the system, and that's why bills need to rise, many would suggest, well, you've racked up a hell of a lot of debt. Maybe you need to sort that out first.
And is there a tricky political consideration for the government as well, bearing in mind, in terms of Thames Water specifically, you've got these sovereign wealth funds, the China Investment Corporation, the Abu Dhabi Investment Corporation involved, and therefore the charge that maybe it should be foreign governments bailing the company out rather than the British taxpayer?
Yeah, not least of all because in the end, you know, this is a form of public asset, Mark. Many say that was given away too easily, if you like, and where companies have managed to pile on debt on the expectation that they've, you know, managed to rack up enormous bills. I think this is tricky for the government for two reasons. First of all, it could involve a lot of taxpayers' money, and it's another crisis they're going to have to deal with, which is never good, given the fact that the Chancellor earlier on today was meeting other regulators about other businesses jacking up people's prices, whether it comes to mobile phones or food or energy. But also, second of all, as I say, it really fundamentally questions this privatisation and the current form it works. Many say it is simply not working. You've got this kind of almost terrible position where you've got water companies which are in massive amounts of debt, cannot raise money because they're in an awful lot of debt. They're increasing consumer bills. Consumers can't afford to pay those bills because there's a cost of living crisis. And the system is creaking. So it is this kind of vicious cycle which is not working. And I think the concern for the government is that Thames Water will be used kind of almost as the example to show that the whole system needs reformed. And whether the government's got the capacity to even think about that at the moment, I'm not entirely sure they do.
Darren in Downing Street, thanks very much indeed.
Now, according to latest research by the Trussell Trust charity, a staggering 11.3 million people in the UK experience hunger due to poverty.
And according to the latest findings, ethnic minorities, disabled people, carers, amongst those most likely to be hit by the various problems. Let's speak to our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, because he's been down to a food bank in Fulham for us. And, of course, lunchtime just over. I guess it's one of those periods of peak demand there, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And people have been coming throughout the day to gather what they need to from in terms of food. But I know we're talking about hunger and food banks, and that is really important. We're at Dad's House. That's a small independent charity in London. They've got 2 outlets in London. And I know we call it a food bank, but it's not just food that they provide here, because in the afternoon today, we're here at the start of a legal clinic because they offer free family legal advice. We've got a couple of clients here that are waiting to be seen. And then here's the legal team as well, who are set up ready for the clients who are coming through the door, trying to get some family advice. We'll speak to Simon, who's the legal director for Dad's House, in just a moment. Just first of all, Billy, just tell us how much of a needed service is this family law advice?
Okay, it's Dad's House Family Law Clinic is the best in Europe, you know, and there's so many dads who need access to their children, you know, and because of the family court, they don't know what to do next. It's so expensive, and pro bono and access to justice is so important, and that's why we have the brilliant team here giving free legal pro bono advice when going through the family court, you know, and that's led by Simon Bruce.
Yeah, and just very quickly, is it a drop-in clinic or could
no?
There is a vetting process.
Yeah, I vet everyone, and I'm on the phone for about an hour, you know, before I invite anyone into the clinic, because it's very important that there's a connection, and also we're doing the right thing for that mum or dad who's looking for questions to the answers, you know, and answers to the questions, and it's so isolating when they don't know what to do next. We've got dads who are suicidal, you know, and we get messages on a daily basis asking for help, you know. So it's so important that Dad's House Family Law Clinic is here, and we can help as many people as possible.
Yeah, a growing number, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Billy, thank you. Let's speak to Simon Bruce then, who's the legal director of Dad's House. Simon, thanks for speaking to us. First of all, just give us an idea of the kind of things that you're hearing from clients.
So our clients come in here who are really motivated to see their children and have a relationship with their children and want to see their children. I don't think there's anything more precious than family. And our clients are often very young and they are bewildered because how can one person who doesn't have access to solicitors, to lawyers, how can one person without money get information about the process and, you know, navigating their way around family law? It's really, really difficult. And so what we do now, it's a complete labour of love. If I think about the week, if I think about the whole week, my favourite day is Wednesday because I come into Dad's house and we see clients who really value our help.
Yeah, and they value it because let's be honest, the family court system is fully backed up, and the legal aid, you know, that the government offers over the years, it's been cut back. The legal aid bill, the cost of legal aid, and so it's they can't afford it. A lot of people can't afford it, and as you say, it's very confusing.
So first of all, I think one of the national scandals that we have, and you blame politicians of every single type, of every single party, is that there is no legal aid for family law. Unless the circumstances are completely extraordinary. Unless there's domestic violence, you cannot get legal aid if you want to see your children, for example. And so, yes, people are completely caught. People who've got no money, 30% of people in England live in poverty. And so, you know, you've got a whole swathe of people who cannot get legal advice about the most important thing in the world, which is their family, their children. And it is such an enjoyable task that we have. You know, we see our clients for an hour, and in an hour we can change their lives. We can give them hope. We can give them possibilities. We can set out how things will go. You know, we've got lots and lots of contacts, mediators. We've got counsellors we can refer our clients to. So, and this place, this charity offers a completely holistic service. You've talked about the food bank. There's everything. You know, football, yoga, cooking classes. You know, and it's a holistic service that we offer. We have to welcome our clients. They have to feel welcome here. And, you know, I'm sitting at a table with students. You know, these students really care. And, you know, it makes me so proud to see these students here. And they're brilliant lawyers. And they all will get really good jobs. Through sitting here, watching us, going through these talks with our clients, and they learn how to look after a client. They take part in all the interviews. So the mentoring of students is really important to us because they are the lawyers for the future.
And I imagine demand is very high.
Incredibly high, incredibly high. I could literally spend 24/7 every single day of my life dealing with emails and speaking to clients and this, that and the other. I can't do that. But, you know, we won loads of awards through our work. We started with nothing. We started with one person around the table just before the pandemic. We worked through the pandemic, we've increased, and we've got awards. We've been in the High Court, we've been in the Court of Appeal, and, you know, we work really, really hard for our clients. We really care.
Really appreciate your time, Simon. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you,
Simon
Paul.
Bruce, they're legal director of Dad's House UK. So that gives you a little idea, guys, of what's going on at this food bank. I say food bank because, as we've just illustrated, it's not just food that they offer here. It's a whole holistic range of services for their clients.
Paul, thank you. Yeah, they are doing incredible, incredible work. Well, do stay with us here on GB News. Still to come, the latest from Ukraine as twin sisters, just 14 years old, are killed in a missile strike on a pizza restaurant. Stay with us.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back to the live desk here on GB News. Let's update you on what's going on in Ukraine with this desperate search through the rubble of that pizza restaurant to find any more survivors of this Russian missile attack in Kramatorsk. 14-year-old twin sisters, Yulia and Anna Aksenchenko, amongst the 10 who've confirmed to have been killed in that strike or last night. And, of course, the rescue efforts then overnight into this morning.
Yeah, and Kramatorsk, we should say, is right near the front line. Well, let's get the views now of Ukrainian Member of Parliament, Kira Rudik. Thank you for joining us here on GB News. What are your latest thoughts then on this explosion? I mean, it seems very targeted.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Well, it is indeed very targeted. Same way as the terrorist attack on Kakhovska Dam was targeted. Same as almost nightly attacks on Kyiv are targeted. So Russia is not denying that they are a terrorist state and they are launching missiles to kill people. They are launching missiles not on infrastructural objects or military objects, but on particular places where people would be killed. Over the last couple of months, most of the buildings that were destroyed in Kyiv were residential buildings, and people who were killed were just people who went to bed at night and did not wake up because they were under the rubble.
Yeah.
So with this being said, the only thing that we could and should do is to get better air defense systems and make sure that we can defend our peaceful cities.
But from the other side, what we should all push to do is that Russia would not be able to continue producing missiles, because on every single day when they are able to avoid sanctions, they are able to produce more and more missiles. And honestly, they have tons of them. They are able to use them without counting. And this is right now what you are seeing. This is the exact result of how they're using them, killing innocent people day by day.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching now the pictures of, you know, the trauma and the rescue efforts. Twin sisters, 14 years old, have died. Are there still believed to be people trapped under the rubble, do you know?
When we are working with the emergency services, they say until they definitely collect all the rubbles and clean the place, there's always a hope. We never lose a hope, and we are trying to get and to fight for every life. So, you know, there has been some miracles around the last days in Kiev when nobody believed and then the person was found. So this is why I know that our emergency services, who are doing a fantastic job, they will continue working until they clean up the building. And no matter that the hope is getting smaller and smaller every hour.
And Kira, I don't know if you're able to update us on suggestions that the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office has identified a resident in Kramatorsk who may have helped to direct the missile to the restaurant. Suggestions that a video was sent to a representative of the Donetsk People's Republic, of course, Russian-controlled area, shortly before the attack, which would clearly give a different, you know, complexion as to what's happened here.
Absolutely. So it is indeed a very sensitive matter, because on one hand, we really want to find every single person who may be helping occupiers and to launch their terrorist attack. On the other hand, if you have some videos of some buildings that you send somebody, you cannot be accused of working with the aggressor, right? So we, right now, the prosecutor's office has launched investigation. Yeah. And as we know, there is a person who is suspected in doing that. And if that would be confirmed, that we will demand, of course, the most severe punishment there is there for an actions like this.
But certainly that there was evidence from those in the area that they may have heard an aircraft as well at the time of this missile attack, indicating it may have been air-launched, which, as you said, indicates the need that you have for increased air defence, particularly perhaps these F-16 fighters you keep asking for.
Well, we do hope that we will receive those F-16 fighter jets this year. It will be totally game changer, not only at the front, but also for the people, like people who are living in Kramatorsk and near the front line, like people who are living in Kiev and all peaceful cities, because we will have an additional layer of protection. You know, there's such a luxury to go to bed every evening knowing that you have high chances to wake up in the morning. And this is not the luxury that we have. We are waking up for the air raid signals, and we are going to the bomb shelters almost every single night. Can you imagine living like this? And this is why we are not asking for fighter jets, because we love fighter jets, or we really want fighter jets. We need them. It's a matter of life and death for us. And you have seen what happened in Kramatorsk could have been prevented if we had those in place.
Yeah, and children and teenagers and others killed just going to have a pizza at a restaurant, as you say, not on the battlefield or in the front line. Kira, as ever, thank you very much for updating us with the latest there in Ukraine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. Well, let's bring you the latest news very shortly. Staying with us, we will have the latest on the Ashes, where a Just Stop Oil protester, or three of them, I understand, were arrested. And the MCC has accused them of endangering the ground staff at Lord's. A spokesman from Just Stop Oil will be here live to explain why they think such action is justified. First, though, the headlines with Tamsin.
Bridget, thanks very much. Here are the headlines at 2:30. Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up by the government, including possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. Environment Minister Rebecca Powell says Thames Water customers should rest assured their water supplies will be protected. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it'll look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT has apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. Sir Keir Starmer has questioned whether the Prime Minister will hit his target of building 300,000 new homes a year. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader accused Rishi Sunak of not agreeing with the Housing Minister on the pledge and instead spending thousands of pounds on adverts criticising the plans. Sir Keir also said house building has collapsed since Mr Sunak scrapped mandatory targets. But the Prime Minister said 2.2 million additional homes have been built since the Tories took power 13 years ago. Downing Street has described the groping allegation against the Conservative candidate for London Mayor, Daniel Korski, as very serious. Number 10 indicated that Rishi Sunak would urge any further complainants to come forward. It's after TV producer Daisy Goodwin made a formal complaint accusing the former Downing Street aide of groping her a decade ago. Mr Korski denies the allegation, saying it's categorically untrue. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the people's channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you are a cricket fan, you might have spotted quite a catch from the wicketkeeper Johnny Bairstow earlier, who physically removed a Just Stop Oil protester from the pitch earlier during the second Ashes test.
Well, the protesters had sprayed orange powder across the wicket before the wicket-keeper intervened towards the pavilion. Match only briefly delayed. Just Stop Oil, of course, have been criticised for endangering those who work there and not respecting the rights of spectators, the MCC being pretty critical of them.
Well, Just Stop Oil spokesperson Zoe Cohen can join us now to talk about this. Zoe, judging by the reaction of the crowds this afternoon or earlier to what Johnny Bairstow did, I'm not sure your tactic really worked.
Hi, Pip. Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Well, there's been a huge number of requests for interviews since the action took place at the Ashes this morning, so I think we'd say that was quite successful, wouldn't you?
Well, successful in what particular way? Because the allegation or the charge is you are losing support by the stunts that you carried out. I'm just reading what Sir Keir Starmer has said. Disappointed in the actions of Just Stop Oil. A Labour Party spokesman saying your tactics are counterproductive, dangerous and wrong. This sort of activity is not appropriate or justifiable in any way. I wouldn't actually say that's winning any people to your cause, is it?
Thanks, Mark. It's not a cause, Mark, is it? It's about survival. Lord Deben, I don't know if you heard him interviewed, he's the chair of the Climate Change Committee, the government's own body monitoring government performance on climate action. He was interviewed this morning on the radio, I heard him, and he talked about the millions and millions of people whose future is being destroyed and how the world will be too hot for people to live in if we don't take immediate action, and that even in this country we won't be able to have the food and water we need.
OK, that might be a valid argument, Zoe, but what gives you the right to impinge on thousands of people today who've paid a lot of money to go and see the test at Lord's? What gives you the right to invade them like that? Zoe.
With love and respect to you, sweetheart, did you not hear what I said?
Please don't patronise me. Please just answer the question.
I'm not patronising you. I am a mum. I have a 20-year-old daughter and I want her to survive. I want her to have a future. I have a 3-year-old niece and I really want her to have hope. She can't even understand what's going on yet. She's only 3. But the head of the Climate Change Committee is saying we won't have food and water. If you don't listen to us, listen to him.
But Zoe, you haven't answered my question. What gives you the right to go into Lord's today and go onto that pitch when people have spent a lot of hard-earned money on a ticket to go and enjoy a day of cricket?
We are on a highway to climate hell, as the UN Secretary-General says. If ordinary people, supporters of Just Stop Oil, don't call the government's inaction and the government's genocidal policies for new oil and gas out, no one does it. You guys don't do it in the media. Who does it if we don't call it out? We have to call out the fact that they are planning over 100 new fossil fuel licences. This must end. It is genocidal and it is a war against the young.
Well, with due respect to you, we have covered the fact that obviously Labour has suggested no more licences for North Sea oil exploration or for drilling, so we do cover the issue. But let us put this to you again. The problem for you is that people are not talking about your cause, they are talking about what a pain in the backside you are in terms of disrupting traffic, disrupting sporting events. You're missing the message.
Well, that's a choice that you guys have, isn't it? That journalists, editors in the media have.
No, we are just reporting what is taking place in the public reaction.
Well, you could be choosing to cover the most important story of our time. I don't know if you've actually covered the fact that the world went over 1.5 degrees global average heating at the beginning of June. That's the threshold that all governments were supposed to be avoiding to avoid catastrophic, irreversible climate change, the breakdown of all that we love, the loss of everything we need to survive as people. And we started to cross that threshold only weeks ago. Did you cover that?
Well, we have been covering climate change. We've been covering the wildfires in Canada, the effects directly
Mark,
on
I asked you,
what is...
Did
Yes,
you
and
cover
I've just answered
specifically
you.
the fact that the world... No, you haven't. You didn't answer the question whether you covered at the beginning of June that the world went over 1.5 degrees global average heating. Did you cover that specific?
Yes, we did. We reported that fact, as we have with other natural occurrences such as the wildfires, which are being attributed
But it's not a natural occurrence.
Let me
It's
finish,
not a
please.
natural occurrence, Mark.
You have asked me a question. Please have the decency to let us answer you. We covered then what people say are the direct consequences, such as the forest fires underway in Canada at the moment.
Great, that's really, really good to hear, so that you'll know that new oil and gas is a death sentence. We cannot afford to have more new oil and gas on top of the deadly amount that we already have in the atmosphere with the carbon emissions we have. It's not us saying that, it's the UN, it's the world leading scientists, it's the Climate Change Committee, it's the Pope, it's all doctors around the world.
And
there are so many people saying
absolutely,
this.
Zoe, you have a lot of evidence to support what you were saying. I totally appreciate that. But do you not think that perhaps you are losing people's respect by engaging in stunts like this yet again today? Because all what happens is people go, well, hey, Johnny Bairstow, isn't he amazing, carrying off that protester? I'm not hearing many people going, well, hey, Just Stop Oil, aren't they brilliant?
Social change is a lot more complex than that, Pip, isn't it? We have to keep sounding the alarm. Alarm bells are not comfortable things. They have to just keep ringing and ringing and ringing until we get the action. The campaign has made huge strides and had huge progress in the year or so it's been going. All political parties, apart from the Tory party, are on board more or less with the no new fossil fuels. We have to keep going. We have no choice. I don't know if you've got young people or children in your families or grandchildren, but their future's absolutely stuffed unless we stop new oil and gas. So anyone watching needs to come and join us. 12 noon, Saturday, Parliament Square.
Can I just ask you, though, that if there is a growing weight of evidence that suggests that your message is not getting through because of the way that you are protesting, will you actually change tactic? Will you actually have a different approach to actually still talk about the issue, but in a different way?
It's a good question, Mark. There's no evidence that... for what you're describing. We hear it a lot in the media that we're putting people off, but we have no evidence for that.
OK, well, let me just read you.
May I finish? Because I did let you finish before.
Yeah, OK.
The research shows that when groups like Just Stop Oil take more what's called radical action, although it's hardly radical compared to what you're seeing going around the world at the moment in terms of climate impacts, it actually encourages people to step up and to support more moderate groups, as well as people to step up and actually join Just Stop Oil. So we have people joining us constantly. You know, it's not evidence-based what colleagues in the media keep saying about we're putting people off, we don't have the support. You know, all civil resistance groups in history haven't been popular at the time. We're not even trying to be popular. We're trying to get the most important story that humanity has ever had in the media day after day. Right. And that is working. It's front page day after day. We're having these conversations. People watching this are able to hear that the government has genocidal policies.
This is the question.
Oil and gas.
Is it working? Because you've addressed the situation about the government, but I'm going to read to you again what the Labour Party have said in the last hour. And, of course, suggestions that they have party donors associated with Just Stop Oil. This is what they've said. We've made our views clear on Just Stop Oil. What individuals choose to do with their money is a matter for them. But in terms of supporting their tactics, we've been very clear that we don't. So not only are you not getting the support of the government, you're not even getting the support of the opposition.
It's not the support of tactics that matter, Mark. It's the policy changes that must happen and must happen quickly. And if we're talking about political donations, to level things up, we really must mention that the Conservative Party had $3.5 million from oil companies, polluters and climate deniers last year alone. This government are literally the mouthpiece of the oil companies. That's probably one of the reasons why they don't want to end new fossil fuel production.
I was talking about the Labour Party.
But they really must. It's genocidal.
I was talking about the Labour Party, not the government, quite specifically.
I know. I was just trying to level things up and have a little bit of mention both sides, because people like Dale Vince, who donate to the Labour Party and also donate to Just Stop Oil, they're not hiding anything. They're also not causing the death of millions of people around the world, which is what oil and gas is causing. Dale is developing renewables, which
green
are much
energy
cheaper than oil and
industrialist,
gas,
yeah.
and are one of the things that we massively need, as well as energy efficiency, better public transport, insulation of our homes, blah, 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 all the things that the government are failing on, if you read the Committee on Climate Change report that Lord Deben talks about. Please do cover that. It's an excellent report.
We're running out of time. I just want to ask you, you've already disrupted the rugby, you disrupted the snooker, you've now disrupted the cricket. What's the next sporting event you're going to disrupt?
I honestly don't know, Pip, but when one emotionally engages with the reality of the fact that our kids are going to be fighting over food in the next decade or so, if that, disrupting sports events is like not a big deal, is it really? We need to think about the survival of our families and our communities and our brothers and sisters all around the world who are dying right now because of climate impacts.
Zoe Cohen, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, thank you very much indeed for joining us on GB News and taking us through all the arguments. Thanks for your time. Now, a jury's been selected ahead of what may be a 4-week trial for the Hollywood actor Kevin Spacey. He's been charged with sexual offences concerning 4 men.
The 12 charges include sexual and indecent assault. These are pictures of him arriving in court earlier. They are alleged to have taken place between 2001 and 2013. Kevin Spacey denies all the charges.
Let's get more with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who's at Southwark Crown Court for us. And, Mark, as we saw there with the arrival shots, of course, people are anxious to get a glimpse of him. And they'll have that chance, well, for another 4 weeks, maybe. It's going to be quite an extended hearing.
Yeah, it's one of these cases, Mark, where there is a very significant contribution in terms of the press who are here from right around the world, who, of course, want to see this celebrity A-lister, this double Oscar winner. And, of course, he is standing trial here facing 12 counts. One of the sex assault charges that he faces is more serious in nature. It carries with it a lengthy jail term should he be found guilty at the end of this process. But what we had today was a relatively short initial hearing, all about just selecting the jury members, empaneling them, swearing them in. There are 9 men and 3 women selected for this jury, along with 2 reserve jury members, should they be needed in the early stages of this trial. And that's it for today. Kevin Spacey, though, will be back here on Friday when the case will begin in earnest, when we will get the opening statement from the prosecution outlining the case ahead. The jury were told very quickly about those 12 sexual assault charges and indecent assault charges that Kevin Spacey will face. The judge telling them, though, that he will hear much more detail about that over the course of this month-long trial, including, of course, hearing from live witnesses.
His lawyer indicating that he will be resident here in the UK, despite having homes, of course, in the States.
Yeah, well, we understand that he does have an apartment here in central London as well from that time where he was artistic director of the Old Vic. Yeah. And indeed, a number of the charges that he faced are alleged to have occurred during the time that he was resident at the Old Vic itself. And his lawyer saying, yes, that he strenuously denies the charges against him. When the charges were put to him in November of last year, he travelled to the UK, so his lawyers say that he could fight the case against him and prove his innocence. For the prosecution's part, they, of course, as I say, will be calling a number of witnesses, including, we believe, those alleged victims during the course of this trial, Mark.
Thanks very much for updating us there at Southwark Crown Court, and of course we'll be following the proceedings as they happen. Thanks very much indeed, Mark.
Now, pop on a pinstripe blazer. You look lovely in one of them.
No, I might stick with the Pims, though, you're about to mention.
Because it is time for the 184th Henley Royal Regatta. The annual rowing event on the River Thames is taking place this week.
Who better? And has she got the hat? Has she got the boater? Ellie Costello. No, she hasn't, but she's in the boat. You've actually made it. So the wedges worked in terms of getting on board.
The wedges worked in terms of getting on board, but I did think I was going to lose my legs, I think, getting onto this boat. I was really quite scared. I didn't manage to find a hat, I'm afraid. The only possibility was stealing one from the gift shop because I don't think I'd get it through expenses. So I decided it was best not to do that. But I am on a boat and I am on the Thames, so welcome to Henley on Thames. It is one of the most prestigious rowing regattas in the world, and we have got the best view for you right now of the course. We've got a race coming down, I believe, so we can bring this to you live. This is the stewards enclosure, which you're seeing here. This is members and their families. They're all lined up on the banks of the Thames. They are watching this race come through here, and Lucia is going to bring you this. I'll see if I can capture who this team is. It's certainly a men's team, but I couldn't tell you which country they're from. Hudson, it looks like. And I don't know where the other team is. Oh, all the way back here, so it's not a very tight race. That's not a very close one. There have been some very, very close ones today. But this is one of the social highlights of the English social season. I was at Ascot last week, as we all know, in that big dramatic hat. I'm at Henley this week. We've got Wimbledon next week. And throw in there the polo as well. That is what makes the English sporting social season. And you can see people here have got the best seats in the house. They've chartered boats for the day. Perhaps they even own these boats, and they can literally moor alongside the course and get the best views. So look at this, it's wonderful. People are just coming up. This gentleman here with his feet up, with a beer in his hand. That's the way to do it, sir. I like your style. Yes, it's just so quintessentially British. You are on telly. Well, you were just on telly, yes. People are just having the most wonderful time. And it's just so fantastic to see. You'll be able to see at the members' enclosure over there, the stewards' enclosure, many men in their striped blazers, many in their club colours. That is what Henley is famous for, those striped blazers. And of course, the boater hats, these gentlemen sporting them so beautifully. I wish I had one now. Perhaps I can get one as a souvenir. But that's what it's for, the fashion, the champagne, and of course the world-class rowing.
Ellie, what would be even better is if your boat moved.
We're moving. We're going at such a beautiful, graceful pace. Can't you see us moving?
No.
Look, watch us go past. They think we're not moving. Look,
I call that a sedate.
Show the rest of the boat here.
Yeah, I call that a sedate
show you around.
pace.
Look.
But I mean, let's actually reflect that we're not talking just about a social occasion, Ali. There are Olympic-class oarsmen and rowers out there as well. Yeah, it's serious stuff.
Absolutely, Mark. I mean, rowers come from all over the world to be here at Henley. I was just in the queue for a coffee, and there was an American Olympian behind me. So he is literally here from the Olympics to be here at Henley. And the Americans in particular love to be here because they love to soak up the Britishness of this event. I've even heard that teams across the world, the Australians, for example, they train with a picture of Henley in front of them as inspiration for where they could be. It's something that these teams from all across the world, they are inspired by Henley and they want to be here. It's what drives them in their training. So it really is a wonderful event from all around the world. As you say, Olympic standard, world-class rowing. And it is just so fantastic to coincide that with wonderful weather. The sun's come out for us here at Henley and people just really, really enjoying themselves.
And perfect timing because you're just coming up to the start line. Clearly, your coxswain there has worked it out.
We are moving, you see.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. And I'm sure that gentleman's wife is now telling him to put his socks back on in that boat, letting the side down.
Yeah, probably is.
Enjoy your cake and champagne, Ellie.
He is, yeah.
Thank you very much for updating us here on GB News. Patrick Christis next. Stay with us on GB News.
Bye-bye.
Afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty warm and humid out there for most at the moment, but some places seeing some pretty heavy rain, and it's starting to turn a little cooler and fresher, and we'll all notice that by tomorrow. Turning cooler and fresher behind this
cold front, which is also providing the focus for outbreaks of rain. Been quite a wet morning over parts of Scotland. That rain slowly now working across parts of northern England, and we'll see some heavy showers too over the Midlands, parts of Wales, but turning dry out from the west. That rain eventually turning up across East Anglia and the southeast. Some heavy bursts of rain this evening over parts of eastern England, and some useful rain overnight across East Anglia and the southeast, where it will stay pretty warm and humid, but elsewhere things turning cooler, temperatures well down into single figures across parts of Scotland. And that fresher feel will be in evidence for most of us during tomorrow. Pretty drab and still quite humid start across the southeast, but the rain should peter out through the morning, clearing away to reveal some sunny spells. There will be some showers during Thursday across North Wales.